Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, I'm glad we have you all here because you know I'm looking for that robust good morning, right?
Yeah.
On the count of 1, 2, 3, let's try it. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning.
That's the robust. Thank you and welcome to the Paula J. Carter Center's diabetes training. We have a good program for you today, and first and foremost, thank you for being lay leaders and volunteering your time to assist the Paula J. Carter Center in getting these community presentations out to Kansas City, to St. Louis, to the Boot Hills, Sykeston, Carruthersville, Charleston, and also, did I miss someone? Central Missouri.
Amen.
Thank you very much. At this time, before I introduce our speaker, I always say this sometimes, that for some reason I communicate a lot by email, and I can tell when I'm communicating by email, I have connected with a wonderful person who's also good in presenting and also will fulfill you with very interesting information as it relates to diabetes. And so she's one of those because we're communicating back and forth. I said, it's almost, I feel like I know this lady. And then when I met her, we were like, oh, she's Sarah and I'm Deborah. Yes. So at this time, I will take the opportunity to introduce our presenter today. Sarah earned her bachelor's degree in foods and nutrition from Purdue University, working her way through school, working in a nursing home kitchen. She completed a year-long internship with a long-term care company specializing in geriatric care. She is a certified diabetes educator with a master's degree in public health leadership from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She has worked with the 65 population for 30 years. Currently, she works full-time at the Community Health Center of Central Missouri as the patient educator. Additionally, she consults at a county-run nursing facility in northeastern Missouri. She is married, has one daughter attending school in Texas, 2 cats, and a big dog named Oscar. She enjoys gardening and running, biking the Katy Trail early in the morning before all the shenanigans start. Without further ado, please welcome Ms. Sarah J. Eber.
Well, thank you all. I'm so excited to see all of you all. Several years ago, when I was still up in northeastern Missouri, we did something really similar to this because there's such a need to get so much of this information out, and people take it better from people they know than from somebody wandering in from some other place in the state they've never heard of before. So before I get started, I wanted to ask just a question of you all. And I should say, did you all fill out the pretest?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. So, what questions do you have that you would like for me to be sure to answer before I leave here today? Go for it. What you got?
Is it true that some people say you can't get healed from diabetes and some say you can?
You mean get cured?
Cured, thank you.
What? That's a good question. I'll be sure to answer that. Ma'am, did you have another question there in the back? Yes, ma'am.
What do they mean about borderline?
I love that question.
Are you or are you not? I mean,
Right.
is it back diabetic?
Yeah, gotcha. I will answer that one too. Other questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
How much of our diabetes is due to lifestyle? It's not inherited, but it's just due to how the foods we eat and how we conduct ourselves.
Gotcha. That's a good question too. I'll make sure I get that. Other question?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a serious disease?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Very good. Now listen, I have a tendency to not be any good at this unless people are talking to me. So if you got a question, you open up. Okay, so what I've got is a whole bunch of stuff to tell you and some tools to give you when you get back to your communities to share with anybody who needs it. You might find you never need any of it for a year or two, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there, keep hold of it. Because I will tell you, one of the mistakes I made when I was doing lay leader training, I had all those files and I just threw them out in April. And then I got that email and went, oh, why didn't I just keep them? I would have just shipped them over and used. Okay, so with that said, diabetes is a serious disease. About 50% is genetic in nature. About 50% of it is preventable. Once you have diabetes, you've got diabetes. I think the easier term to say is remission. And you can be in remission long enough to die of cancer or get hit by a bus. Okay, so it's not really a cure, it's still kind of there. But something will get you before diabetes if you take care of it. And tell me your question again.
Borderline.
Borderline is like being borderline diabetes is like borderline pregnant. But to answer to that, we do have something we call it nowadays, and it's pre-diabetes. And the good news is it is preventable at that point. So I have a handout for you about pre-diabetes. So if you're working with somebody who doesn't necessarily have diabetes but knows they're at high risk, here's a paper you can give them to get them started. And a couple of things I was going to make sure I say to you all, and I put it on the board. One thing, I've done a lot of work with adult learners in my life. And we adults learn best if it's what we want to know right now. If we can put our hands on it. If there's something we can do to practice it, and if we write it down. So I would challenge you all as you're working through with your groups, thinking about all this stuff. I'm going to slam you with so much stuff. You're like, oh, Sarah, not fair. But at the end, when you work with diabetes training, there are some steps. Okay, the insurance companies will pay doctors and offices that are accredited in diabetes care to do diabetes self-management education. And those are 6 to 8 week courses, 2 or 3 hours using nurses and dietitians and all these other professionals. And they take them through this whole curriculum. And then they bring them back once or twice a year if they need it. And larger medical centers will do that. We actually have an accredited program we've never used here at the Community Health Center here in Jefferson City. And Medicaid is developing its own, Medicaid's developing its own program that'll be reimbursed by an accredited area, an accredited office. So there's a lot of reimbursement and stuff like that kind of coming down the pike, and it is a Medicare benefit for diabetes self-management training by an accredited center. So if you can actually go online and find accredited centers and doctors' offices and hospitals in Missouri. And if you've got people who've got diabetes and need the training and they have Medicare, that's a covered benefit. Are you all familiar with silver sneakers?
Yes.
Oh, go. Okay, all right, so I do. Woohoo! Yes, okay, all right, so with that said, so I just told you all that about kind of the way those curriculums run, because I'm gonna slam you all with it in about 45 minutes. Okay, so what I would tell you is when you step back from this, and you're trying to think about the groups you're dealing with, one overarching issue is respect. And I don't think I have to talk to this group much about that. But if it's one thing I've learned and tried to teach other dietitians as I've run into this, is no matter how smart you are, how many years you've spent in diabetes education or whatever, I don't care whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or the Pope, whoever you're talking to has more experience living with themselves and their life and their diabetes than you ever will.
Yes.
So if you assume that you know more than they do, you are wrong.
Yes.
Got to meet folks where they're at and help them where they feel like they need it. And the challenge for health professionals is we say, oh, we know this works, we want everybody to do this and be perfect. Ain't nobody perfect. Is anybody military? Has anybody here been in the military? Is anybody a fan of NCIS? Okay, all right. So remind me at the end, I'll tell you a story related to dealing with people who think they know more than other people. Okay, all right, back to that. So overall is that respect for everybody who comes at you. Now to the nitty gritty of diabetes. You kind of divide up trying to teach people about diabetes in 4 areas. First and foremost is everybody needs to be safe with their diabetes. And if you forget any of this, I wrote it on the board in the back. In green, it's hard to see. Even for me, standing up here. Okay, so first of all is that people are safe with their diabetes. Second thing is they know the basics of how to take care of themselves. The third part is living well with the disease. Or if you're trying to prevent it, how to live well and prevent it. And the fourth part of that is advocacy. We want to empower people to advocate for themselves related to their diabetes care, whether they're talking to their doctor, their nurse, the person in the emergency room who they're wandering in with and trying to deal with. We need our folks to be able to advocate for themselves. Because as much as I'd like to say every dietitian's a patient advocate, and all health professionals are patient advocates, sometimes you get lost in the system, just like everybody else. So we need to empower people to advocate for themselves. And with diabetes, knowledge is power. The more you know about your disease, the more you can control it, and wherever you find yourself. Okay, so those are the 4 big areas: safety, the basics, living well, and advocacy. So at the end of the day, if anybody you're talking to knows how to be safe with their diabetes, that's important. What does safety involve? Okay, safety involves knowing what to do for a high or a low blood sugar, what the symptoms are and how to treat it. It involves knowing what to do if you're sick, knowing what your medications are, knowing how to check your blood sugar, and when you need to call for help. Okay, so backing up again. Signs and symptoms of high and low blood sugar, and what to do to treat those things. What to do if you're sick and what to expect. Knowing what your medications are. Knowing how to check your blood sugar. And knowing when to call for help. Okay? And so, to that note, I brought a whole bunch of stuff. Okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to pass them around and y'all just take one. And take it back, photocopy it, redo it if you want. I think everything I've given you here is what they call public domain, which means that it's free to all of us, okay? I also included a thing about hand washing because part of being safe is preventing extra infections, so I added that on there just because I can't help myself, okay? And let's see, okay, that gets us started. Okay, so with safety, high and low blood sugar symptoms. Does anybody know what the symptoms of a high blood sugar are? Actually, a lot of times that's more often low. That's low. And one of the annoying things that you're going to find when you get this paper in front of you, one of these papers that's coming around is, I call him Bald Fred, and he's picture faces of what high and low blood sugar feel like. Okay? And what you will notice, the annoying part, is that you're going to notice that some of those symptoms for high and low blood sugar are indeed the same. Okay? So the way you tell the difference is if you go from feeling good, and this is exactly what I tell my clients, you go from feeling good to feeling like crap. That's low blood sugar. So you need to treat it. Yes, man. And you can have low blood sugar even if you're not on diabetes medications. Hence one of the symptoms of prediabetes. Okay? So with that said, if you're feeling dizzy and lightheaded all of a sudden, that's probably a low sugar. If your meter's close by, check your sugar. If it's not, pretend it's low and treat it anyway. So, better to be high for a little bit than to bottom out and hit the ground. Okay, and hence my prop, some of you ladies can attest to it works. This is about $4 at Dollar General, and they're fabulous. But if you look at the label on them, it takes 3 pieces to be 15 grams of carbohydrate. That's about enough to bring your sugar up. And then one of the cool things about these things is unlike other peppermints, they melt in your mouth. So if you got somebody who's starting to act a little funny, and they can still speak to you, get these things in their mouth. Because it will dissolve and the sugar will start to go right through their mouth long before it ever gets to the gut to bring the sugar up. Goes right through the mucous membrane, okay? So I keep these in my car, I keep them in my office. And I send my patients out the door with them if they don't have a sugar source. That is a safety issue. So if you're on diabetic medication, or if you have a history of diabetes and low blood sugars, carry a sugar source with you. So you want to really encourage your folks to make sure that they carry a sugar source with them. The other thing that's being passed around is a medication sheet. It is always a good idea to encourage your folks, everybody, whether diabetes or not, to carry a list of your medications with you at all times. And there's a couple of websites on the top of this paper, and if you don't mind, ma'am, I'm going to borrow yours just to put it up. It looks kind of like this, and there's some websites. You can pick up medic alert bracelets and identification at most pharmacies for $10 to $15. And that's all it takes to alert an EMT if someone can't answer for themselves that they have a health condition. Likewise, younger people even, type 1 diabetes that use insulin and have a low blood sugar have been known to be pulled over by police, thrown in jail before anybody ever figures out they're not drunk, their blood sugar's low. But if they had a medic alert bracelet on, somebody might have said, hello, they need some help, okay? So, on that, there's a website, it's called Lauren's Hope, really pretty jewelry that is also for men and women that are medic alert bracelets. It's gotta be fun, right? Okay, so, knowing the signs and symptoms of high and low blood sugar and how to treat them, carrying a list of medications and a medic alert bracelet. Now, backing up, we talked about what you do to treat low blood sugar, sugar source. Has anybody seen that commercial on TV? And I don't know if you all know this name. William Defoe is an actor. Kind of old guy now, but he's an actor. And he is standing in Marilyn Monroe's white dress. Yeah. The man is not attractive. No. He's just not. And the guy hands him a Snickers, and all of a sudden he's Marilyn Monroe? Yeah. Well, that's a great idea, but it don't work like that. There's too much fat in that Snickers bar for it to bring your sugar up that quick. So treating with chocolate and fatty stuff like that, stuff that's got fat added in, will not bring your sugar up quick enough. It needs to be plain sugar. So that's why those candies work good, a regular soda or fruit juice, or, believe it or not, skim milk. Skim milk doesn't have any fat in it. It's got enough sugar that it'll go right through the mucous membranes. The sugar will come up and it won't spike. Yes, ma'am.
Pure honey.
I'm sorry, what? Honey? Honey works good. And that's another thing I've told people, if you go to a restaurant, no, those aren't even supposed to be in there. This just got stuck in the fax machine when I made coffee. Okay. So one of the things I also tell people if they don't have the candies, like when you go to the restaurant, snag a packet of jelly or snag a packet of the honey and keep it with you. Squeeze it in your mouth. It works just like that. Okay? So those are all fast, easy, cheap treatments for low blood sugar. Did I not make enough copies? Wow, I'm sorry. Hopefully I have enough to make. I'll pass it on. I'll keep one to the side or something. Okay.
There is like a mint, the little pill thing, the Walmart carries.
Yes, glucose tablets.
Yeah, what it was.
Great point. That's awesome. Thank you, ma'am. And if you've got folks that can afford it, you can send them to the pharmacy and they'll sell glucose tablets, which have sugar. You have to have 3 or 4 of those, just like you would have about 3 of those mints. Okay. All right. So that's how you treat low sugar. Now, anybody know how you treat a high sugar? Drink a big glass of water and go for a walk. Down comes the sugar. Okay? And if you're on insulin and you had instructions from your doctor, then you might have what they call a correction dose of insulin, which means when it spikes, and you check your sugar. See, now we're back to being safe. You know how high your sugar is, and you have a correction dose from your doctor, then you can take extra insulin to bring it down. But that's the only time it's safe. When my clients say, I just took some extra insulin, and I know I haven't taught them, and I know I've seen how they take their medicine, and that scares me, That scares me. But I also have a lot of clients who I have no concerns about their ability to do that, because they know what they're doing, okay? So, and I guess that give you a little idea of that. Those are really key for safety. I can't tell, okay, and so let's take this minute to talk a minute about pre-diabetes. And I'm gonna pass this around again. This is about pre-diabetes, and again, I made this, so you can recopy this until it doesn't copy anymore, okay? But with pre-diabetes, this story I always like to tell, and I'll also say this to you, as you're talking to people and talking about diabetes, the more stories you can tell and the more you can make them laugh, the more they will remember what you said. As soon as you make someone laugh, it shifts their brain chemicals, and they're more receptive to anything you're gonna say for about 5 minutes. So you better make it a funny talk, okay? Okay, so one of my favorite stories about pre-diabetes, and it seems to be a time of the year. Usually, when school starts back up, within a couple of months, I used to have all these patients coming in to see me for what they used to call reactive hypoglycemia. Okay, what's that? Well, what that meant was and they were typically women who had recently had babies, still had their baby fat, and had a couple of school-age children. And they jumped up in the morning, got the kids in the car, got them to school, and on their way home wrapped their car around a tree and found themselves in the emergency room with a low blood sugar. Guess what we call that now? Pre-diabetes. Okay, so what's happening is long before the blood sugar gets too high, your body keeps it. There's already a problem of brewing. So what the body does is it produces a bunch of a chemical called insulin to keep the sugar controlled. Problem is the longer that, and as you gain weight, now see, these are the risk factors for prediabetes, are also the risk factors for type 2 diabetes. Okay, you ready? They're all saying weight gain, birthdays.
My birthday.
Birthdays. The more you have, the more risk you're at. No fair.
No, I thought you spent the second time of the year.
No. The more birthdays you have, the more at risk you are. Okay, that's not fair. That's what we spend all our life having our birthdays, right? Okay, that's what you get for it, diabetes. Okay, not really. Okay, so the risk factors are weight gain, birthdays, family history of diabetes, and there are some medications that can put people into diabetes. Okay? So those are some of those risk factors. If your mom and dad both have diabetes, it's in your genes. If it's in your family anywhere, it's in your genes. Okay? The good news is we have been able to keep 50% of people with both mom and dad with type 2 diabetes from developing diabetes. So there's that answer to yes, it's preventable for at least half of us. Okay? And they've proven that in this country and in the United Kingdom and several other countries. They've gotten that to work. That we can prevent diabetes. So that's pretty cool. And even better though, which makes it easier for all of us, we're trying to teach people how to do this, is the way you prevent diabetes is exactly what you do to treat it and control it. So we don't have to tell people different things. Okay, so those risk factors again are weight gain, birthdays, family history, and genetics, and there are certain ethnic groups that have diabetes in them. African American, African, but you know the youngest type 2 diabetic in this country is a Pima Indian. So Native American Indians, there's no getting out. Those folks are going to get diabetes.
Is that right?
Yes, yes sir, it is.
One.
Their gene pool is very close because of the nature of that being such an old race that kind of got squelched here in the United States. You know, there wasn't a lot of shifting around. They kind of stayed to themselves, stuck on those reservations. So their gene pool kind of went like this.
Right.
And so everybody's got it.
Don't go in right.
Imagine a year and a half old with type 2 diabetes. Okay. Now that's different from type 1. Only about 5% of all people with diabetes have type 1 diabetes. That is considered an autoimmune disorder where the body turns on itself and the cells that produce insulin die. So those folks always have to use insulin. There are some people with type 2 diabetes that have to use insulin eventually. That doesn't always necessarily mean they've gone to type 1. But we do have some people with type 2 diabetes that do go on to type 1. So everything I'm telling you right now may be very different in another 10 years, because there's still ongoing research and a lot of things that that we're learning about diabetes and diabetes care. Okay, yes ma'am.
So how do you go from a type 2 back to a type 1?
You don't, unless, most people, when they have type 2, maintain a little bit of insulin function and some other things. Sometimes autoimmune disorder kind of kicks in and those cells die. And we've seen that happen with people who have a hard time maintaining a healthy weight and stay inactive. So staying active and eating healthy, a lot of times keeps all the things pumping pretty good. So it works for prevention and it works to treat. Okay, so the safety is high and low blood sugar, knowing what your medications are, wearing a medical alert in case somebody needs that help, knowing when to call for help, knowing how to check your sugar, right? Never once have we talked about eating or exercise quite yet, have we?
Not yet.
No, but in order to stay safe, these are other things you need to do, okay, when you have diabetes.
What was the third thing you named on safety?
It was high and low blood sugar, taking your knowing your medication, checking your blood sugar, wearing a medical alert, and knowing what to do on a sick day. Now, when I teach my people about diabetes, guess what? The one thing they always forget: what to do on a sick day. Why is that? Because they're usually not sick when they're talking to me. And that takes us right back to why it's so important to catch adult learners where they are. So if you want to talk about what to do on a sick day with your group, do it right after they got the flu shots. Because it's right in front of everybody's head. It's like right there, because their arm still hurts from the shot. Or in the middle of the winter when half the group can't show up because they're sick. And hope somebody calls them and says, hey, you missed this session, but here's what you're supposed to do. Okay? So with that said, I thought I had a handout somewhere. And if not, I'll make sure I get it to you. I thought I made a bunch of copies of that too. A sick day management handout. I find it later, we'll send it around. And it's a one-pager, and it's got a sick-looking guy with a thermometer in his mouth. Yeah, is it in there? You got it? Okay. All right. So I made now on that sheet it says something about ketones. Check your urine for ketones. If you have type 2 diabetes, you don't have to do that. That's for people with type 1 diabetes or pregnant women with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. No, you don't have to worry about pregnancy part. But you can, don't worry about the ketones. And some other time I'll teach about ketones. But it's not important for any of us here. Me either. Okay? All right? So there's your safety issues. Okay? Keeping people safe with their diabetes is important. If they know their medications, if they know how they feel when their sugar goes low and high, if they're wearing their medical alert ID, they know their medications, they're carrying their sugar source, they're carrying their water, you know they've been paying attention, right? Okay, so now the basics is probably where we'll spend a fair chunk of time. So I'm going to step forward into the living well and the advocacy part. Living well with diabetes means that you recognize you have a chronic condition, it's not going to go away, and you are a lot more prone to depression as a result of having diabetes. So when you're down and you can't get up, you've got to be able to tell your people not to feel bad about that. This is a part of the disease and it stinks, but it's reversible. It will get better. People with diabetes have more bouts of depression than people who don't have diabetes. So that's why we got to bring each other up. And if the depression is really bad, you need to have them get to their doctor and get some help with that. It is a chemical shift in the brain. It is not a weakness. And we've got to empower people to feel that. It is not a weakness. It is a chemical imbalance that can often have a chemical solution. Temporary fixes for depression, babies and animals, right? Okay, but that's not going to get it. That'll only help for a few minutes to make you laugh, okay? So whatever you do, help your people really feel that. Don't feel bad if you're down. It is a chemical thing and you can correct it. You just need to go get some help, okay?
But I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
As far as that, my opinion, as far as that depression goes, a lot of times when you're going to the doctor for depression, for a lot of things, first thing they want to do is give you a pill.
Right.
And my thing is, all these pills, they taste all these pills.
Yeah, they add up.
Yeah, my thing is, you know, you try to get them out the house, get them involved, and get them to do other things.
Things to get their mind
you
off
know, dogs and cats is not gonna make you feel good. I'm allergic to all that stuff.
Kids do? I have some friends that say they're allergic to it.
But, I mean, you might get them involved, you know, and maybe
Yeah.
that's what the doctors need to, you know, start trying to get people to do, involved. And a lot of, I'm seeing, and I feel that a lot of times with our seniors, it could be, they're sitting at home.
And they're
watching the
alone,
TV.
oh yeah, that'll make you depressing if you don't have diabetes.
You know.
Right, but I will tell you, when you do you're absolutely right, and I say that to my patients a lot, especially my disabled ones. Like, you need to go volunteer somewhere. Because when you volunteer, if you don't feel good, you don't go. But the rest of the time you go, because it does lift you up. But I do want you to keep in mind though, doctors, and then if you're, I always hope and try to be positive, that your family doctor knows enough about diabetes to know that depression is a part of it. And in all fairness, getting them out and doing that as first line, or maybe getting them to a counselor to talk through things,
Right.
that works. And that's a benefit that'll be coming into Medicare and Medicaid in the next year or so, a little bit more money for behavioral health. But it is also a chemical problem, and it might require a chemical fix. And the thing about it is, if you've already gotten them out, you've tried everything else, and they're still kind of down, get the pill, take it for a little while. And those are very often the people who can come back off of their depression medicines. Because it's just like a cycle all of our bodies get into. You take a medicine for a little while and you get to feeling better, stop it. A lot of times you're better, especially if you're engaged. But if you've got somebody, I'm gonna get your questions, I see it. You know those commercials where they put that smiley face in front of them and they're talking about the depression? Some people put on a good front. So they might be getting involved, they might be doing things, but secretly it's still back there.
Yeah, right.
So if you recognize those symptoms, get them to somebody and let's get them some medicine to reverse that, and then get to counseling so they can talk through it. And then all that you don't have to get, nice thing about counseling, if it's done well, you don't need to do it forever. And good depression medicine will work when you need it, when you have diabetes, and you can stop it. Yes, sir, your question?
I just wanted to say that I suffered from a deep depression. I lost a son in 1995. He was shot 5 times. And I totally was lost.
Yep.
And I had to get on medicine to help my depression.
Yep.
And finally, through the medication, I got to the point where I seen the light. It started becoming active, and I came out of it.
Yep.
And today I take no depression medicine.
Woo!
I've been doing it for like maybe 10 years.
That's awesome. And there's your testimony, it works.
It works.
But you also have someone who got involved and engaged, which is exactly what you
And
did.
also counseling.
Yeah. So it's all part of that. And as advocates for our people we see every day, we have to encourage that and remind them that there is that. And at some point, our people with diabetes and they need to know that, to recognize these, I'm feeling the depression, I know this is part of the deal. Doctor, you need to work with me and here's what I think I need. My goal with my patients is that when they walk in to see their doctor, they can tell them what's going on with them, what they think needs to happen, and they can get the doctor's expertise, and very quickly they can get fixed, and out the door they go back to real life. Okay? That's why the more you empower your folks you're working with, they feel like they're confident, they know enough about their disease that they're confident. That doctor puts his or her pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. And if you've got a physician, and I have said this on more than one occasion, who is talking down to you, is not listening to what you say, go find another one. Because there's no point in that. Yeah. Okay, so now I was going to save this to the end, but I think everybody can maybe use a little less. So we used to do groups of diabetes training, and I was working with one primary care practice in particular. And we set it up so that the doctors could come in and teach about 15 minutes of each session and then go out. And there was one doctor in this practice who didn't believe, he never sent patients to see us. So the patients he came in, the day he came in to talk, none of his patients were in the room because he didn't send them to see us. And he also didn't refer them to dietitians and diabetes educators. Now the guy's my age. And this was 20 years ago, okay? So he actually got up in front of our group and told the folks there that he didn't care whether they checked their blood sugar at home or not, that was for them, and that he would never use that data. Can you see my blood pressure going up? Watching that. So breathe, and then I pretty much contradict him the minute he walks out the door. And then, Actually, I didn't have to do that. I was able to show our patients how they can really use that to talk to their doctor. And then a few days later, I was asking him about sending us patients, and he said,
Thank you.
I teach my patients everything they need to know, and they do, and he had a real obnoxious, strict diet that had absolutely no science background, right? None. There was no, and a lot of them will do that. Much as it's frustrating me. We have some that are really good, know what they're doing, some that kind of push an agenda. And some of them, and most of them mean well, some of them just, anyway. So the story, so here's this, so as he's telling me that his patients do what he tells them and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just looking at him. And I said, so you mean to tell me your patients do everything you tell them? Yes, they do. That was as close as I've ever come to Jethro slapping somebody. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Never heard that one.
Oh my goodness. Whoa, right upside the head. Anyway, okay, so again, when you laugh, you produce a bunch of chemicals, it always makes everything easier to digest. The more you teach folks, the more they'll advocate for themselves and stand up to that kind of tyranny, okay, and get good care. And if your doctor isn't taking care of you, go somewhere else. Somebody that somewhere wants to give you good care, okay? Now, the living well part comes to knowing what your blood tests mean and what your numbers are, knowing how to cope with your disease versus letting it take you over or feeling like it's taking you over. And that also is where counselors come in, good friends come in, and people like you come in, because that's that support. And being able to access community resources, also really important. So as you get your fingers on the resources in your community that help people be active, help people eat healthy, help people get support when they're feeling down or when they're struggling getting their medication or whatever their problems are, help them get those resources, because that will help them live well with their disease, okay? And there's a whole hour session in our curriculum where we spend time talking about that. So we could do that a whole other session. Yes, sir.
One thing that I often hear seniors especially talk about their doctors and so forth. I think we need to emphasize that we are responsible for our health.
Yes, sir.
I go to the doctor to confirm what I already believe.
Exactly.
And so you depend too much upon the doctor does what he does, but you wouldn't have to go to the doctor if you do what you're supposed to do.
All right.
Yeah, and you know, and one of the things that you can use to help people really feel that is, believe it or not, we have research to back that up. There's been 2 really big clinical trials done on type 1 and type 2 diabetes. They were started back in the 70s. It's a long time for some data, right? We can all remember the 70s. I mean, okay? That's how long this research has been going on. And the trials done on the type 2 and the type 1 diabetics all showed that people who, what they did was they set up their test studies, and they had some people who were treated standard. When I say standard, I mean their doctor told them what to do and they were just expected to do it. The other groups were shown how to manipulate what they needed around their lifestyle and to make it work for them. And after 7 years, they stopped the study because their results were so conclusive, they felt like ethically they had to offer that other treatment to the ones who were in the standard, the traditional treatment group. And that evidence showed that people who manage their own diabetes, that is, people who know what to do when their sugar's high or low, carry their sugar source, wear their medical ID, carry a list of their medication, try to eat healthy and exercise, and monitor their blood sugar and take their medicine, they are healthier, and they have fewer complications from their diabetes. The people who do just wait for the doctor to tell them what to do, they were sicker.
Wow.
So that is the evidence base for your statement. You are absolutely right about that. So empower your people with those facts. Because people who step up for that, you also don't want to sugarcoat it, it ain't easy. And sometimes it's downright hard. And, okay, I want everybody to take just a second and think about your number 1 sin food. Everybody's different. Everybody's got that go-to. All right? I will tell you mine is French silk pie. Okay, and I'm here to tell you when it calls, I'm gonna get some. And is it good for me? Yes. Is it good for me if I had diabetes? Yes. Okay, how do we do that? It is completely doable. Now, maybe not every day, for 2 meals a day, but once in a while, and everything. Fried chicken ain't gonna hurt you, potato chips aren't gonna kill you, if you know how to work them in. And that is the fun message. So teaching the nutrition and the exercise is actually the fun part, because that's where you can help people realize they can work that stuff in. And if you get somebody who gets down to their real nitty gritty of it, you can work anything in a healthy diet with diabetes. Okay? So that's the fun part. That's what dietitians should be teaching you to do. Okay? So with that said, I want to spend a little bit more time on that because that's more fun. But back to this, one last thing on the safety. We're talking about monitoring your blood sugar. If you write it down, you can see what your trends are. And that's a way that you help people, you empower people to see what their trends are. And the times that tell us the most with checking your sugar are before a meal and 2 hours after. Okay? And if you make a quick note about what you ate, well, you walk into the doctor and here's a 250. Okay, and normal blood sugar for the record is 70 to 120. That's normal for everybody. Now, you and your doctor might decide your target blood sugar is not quite that low. And quite frankly, for people who are a little more frail, say not very active, 70 and above, or 75 and above, the goal may be just to keep their sugar below 150, but not down to 100. Right. So the target can be different than normal blood sugar. Okay? In fact, we've proven that an A1C of 8 is about safe for an elderly adult, not below 7, which is what your doctor should be telling y'all. Okay?
Now they push 6.
Yeah, they'll push 6, and I'm going to tell you below 7 is good until you are a frail person, 60 or 65 or above, or a frail person over 75, or even 70. Because one of the symptoms of a low sugar in an older adult is confusion. And a little bit of imbalance. Now we're talking about a fall and a hip break, and let's just say no. Okay? So keeping that sugar a little higher is safer for an older adult.
You said below 7?
For an older adult, 8. An A1C of 8, or a sugar of 150. Doesn't need to be 120, 100. Not safe.
Can I make a statement?
Yes, ma'am.
My doctor wants me to keep mine at least 140 or below. But when my sugar gets to 80, it starts dropping real fast.
Fast, right.
Yes. And
That's right, you ain't
my
getting
daughter, if she's around me, she can tell because I started getting like confused about things, you know.
Right.
Going to the refrigerator, I might go twice and be like, Mama, what you looking for? And I'll be like, girl, I forgot. I was going to the refrigerator for something I forgot, or I might have something, forgot what I was trying to do, you know.
And it can mask itself as dementia. And guess what? It's not they just have low sugars. Or if you've got somebody with Alzheimer's, and they start to get combative, or their behavior changes, check their sugar. Drives me nuts in the nursing
That's
home.
what she'll tell me to go check your
Yeah,
sugar.
check your sugar.
It's 80.
They tried giving,
Your blood sugar too low.
yeah, time to eat something. Get you some of them hard candy she's supposed to be carrying around, right? Okay, so what I'm gonna pass around for you to share, these are 2 different types of blood glucose logs. One of them includes blood pressure, because high blood pressure is what they call a comorbidity. High blood sugar and high blood pressure go together, unfortunately. When one goes high, the other does too. When the one gets better, the other does too. So you definitely, and talking about the symptoms of stroke and heart attack, that's a whole other class, okay? But we need to be sure they know what those signs and symptoms are, because you can live through that and go right back to normal if you're ready for it. Okay, and that's all I'll say about that. Yes, ma'am.
Cost of those, the managing the blood sugar. Cost of that. I have people come to me quite a bit and say, I don't have any more strips, I don't have this and stuff to take. But I'm like, don't they supply it in the department free or?
No, the strips are ridiculously expensive. But it is a Medicare and a Medicaid benefit to have the strips, but there's only so many a month. So you could probably do a whole session on proper blood glucose monitoring technique, because some people, if they're having trouble with their poker, they may go through 3 or 4 strips, and boom, and then you're done. You know, you're out by the middle of the month. You had to, yeah, there are 2 different ones. One has blood pressure and on it, the other does not.
But you know, like, Medicare doesn't wanna pay for, like, checking your sugar.
Oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead. What was your
Okay, my
question?
doctor told me some time ago that, you know, Medicare doesn't want you to, won't allow you to do it but once a day.
That's all they've got, unless that you are on insulin and your A1C is high and your doctor asks for an exception. So your doctor has to be willing to send that forward, same thing with Medicaid, okay? Now, the only thing you can do with the strips, you know, even our clinic, we can get sample medications, we cannot get sample strips.
Oh, really?
Nobody gets them, things are expensive. So your best bet there is if you already have a meter that's, what a lot of my clients do, they'll buy one of those cheap Rely-On meters from Walmart because they can afford those. I will tell you that our federally qualified health center, we actually have meters that we only sell to people with no insurance. And those strips are a lot cheaper from us. But when you're out of strips, that is a barrier to good self-management. You are absolutely right. So if people know how to check their sugar appropriately so they don't waste a lot of strips, that's the best way you can empower them to have them when they need them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do those strips expire?
Yes, they do. The strips expire. So one of the training things, so if you all are doing a little bit of a training on blood glucose monitoring, first of all, you always want to tell them to poke the side, not the tip or the pad of their finger.
Yeah.
Make sure their fingers are warm. Have any of y'all been able to get blood out of a turnip?
No.
You won't get any blood out of a cold finger either, okay? So make sure the hands are good, warm, and clean,
That's right.
and you poke to the side, and you get a nice blood drop. Now, those little poker things, they hurt and they make an obnoxious noise. Nobody likes to do that. I don't like to do it to people, okay? But if you get that little penlet right close to the skin and then hit the button, then it will go in. Almost all the little penlets nowadays allow you to dial up how hard it hits you. So if you're a gardener or you're working with hot pots and pans and you got calluses, you probably need a 4, 5, or 6. If you don't do anything but read books and teach children and your hands are nice and soft, you might only need a 1 or a 2. Okay? So those are ways that you can help people troubleshoot with their meters. Is making sure their technique to poke is like it should be. And when they get a little blood drop, nowadays the meters, they used to take hanging blood drops, they're obnoxious, take lots of blood. Now they hardly take any. All you gotta do is slide the little sneak part of the meter into the blood drop. But unless, where is that a problem? They have visual problems. They are never gonna get that blood drop. Or if you got somebody who's denying, doesn't kind of admit that they have visual problems, they may not see the blood drop. So this will be something you'll be able to see when you got them in front of you. And this takes a little bit more work, but you end up going back to the doctor and saying, hey, we need an exceptional meter. We need a meter that talks and that has a thing that will help guide the finger to that spot. So blood glucose monitoring is hard.
Okay, and what is the one they have on TV now where you?
It doesn't really work that good. You still have to collaborate it with a finger poke. And they tell you there's fewer, but there really isn't. And those are only reimbursed for people with type 1 diabetes on an insulin pump. Yes, ma'am.
What about the new meters? A nurse practitioner told me about that you attach to your skin and then you just wave it and you don't have to poke your.
You are still going to have to poke to corroborate that. Yeah, no, they're not that. The data is not there. You're still going to need to collaborate it with some finger pokes.
Having it on TV, it'll mess a lot of people up.
Yes, ma'am, you're right. What were you saying?
But you can't, and doctor order you the thin needle, the thinner needle.
The thinner needle, if you don't need it to hit you as hard.
Yes.
Yeah, there's different gauges that they can order for you, that's true, or a heavier gauge, so that's all very true too. So unfortunately, poking the fingers, the other thing, they used to talk about alternative site testing, you could poke here, you can poke your forearm. You would only encourage people to do that if it's a normal situation. If they're having a high or a low, they still need to use their finger because this is more accurate. Okay, so those are some little bit information that becomes really important to making somebody's life easier.
We got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
That is right, yes ma'am.
Okay.
A1C, I'm still a little confused.
A1C?
Is that an acronym for something?
It is, and I'm so glad you pointed that out, because some of us who do this all the time, we get stuck in our jargon. So here's how I explain the A1C, and sometimes when my clients come in, I know what they're coming to see me for, but I always ask them, what are we talking about? What do you want to talk about today? What are we working on together? Not how can I help you, what are we working on together? Because that goes back to, you're responsible for this, okay? So I'll say, what are we working on together? And they'll say, well, they told me I had my blood sugar was high, or I had an 8 or something, and they have no idea what that is. The hemoglobin A1C versus the blood from your finger, they're different, okay? Now, the A1C used to call the anti-cheat lab, and it's only been being used about the last 20 years, okay? So, have you all heard of the word hemoglobin molecule? Okay, so a hemoglobin molecule is your red blood cell. Okay, so on the red blood cell, we have figured out that there's these little spots that collect sugar. They're called the A1C fraction of the red blood cell. That's where it gets its name. Hemoglobin A1C. A1C for short. And these little spots on the red blood cell collect sugar. So as your body's manipulating your sugar between 70 and 120, sometimes, and if you poke your own finger, you can tell this. You poke your finger 1 minute and poke it the next, totally different number. Okay, because your body is so awesome. It is dynamic. It is always putting sugar where it belongs and taking it and putting it someplace else. It's doing it constantly. You don't ever think about it. Okay? Now, so as that red blood cell's floating around, doing its thing, delivering nutrients, it's picking up sugar and it's dropping it off. Okay, now, a red blood cell is born and lives and dies in 3 months. Wow. That is the life cycle of a red blood cell. Then our bodies recycle it and make some more. And we don't have to worry about that. Just like you don't have to empty that recycle bin. Right? Your body takes care of that. So, we can measure the percentage of sugar saturation on those A1C spots on that red blood cell. And they give us a percentage. Usually somewhere between 5 and 17. Okay? That's the A1C. It's a percentage. And it tells your doctor what your blood sugar has been averaging over the life of the red blood cell. 3 months. Okay? So, it tells an average. Not what it was today. Oh, but I had it. Oh, but Dr. Doherty, I had a half a French silk pie last night. It won't matter, because this measures 3 months. Or you can be a good old boy or girl for 3 days before you go see your doctor, and you walk in, that fasting sugar is beautiful, but your A1C says, okay? And so that's how it comes out. Now, if you've got somebody who's trying to check your A1C once a month, they're wasting your money. Do not let them do that. Every 3 months. Hospital wants to run your A1C and you're having something wrong with you, you walk in and said it was 8 a month ago, and that's all you need to know. Get the letter from my doctor, do not bill me for that lab.
All right.
How about that for attitude?
Right.
All right? So that's what the A1C is. Normal, if your A1C is below 7, that means your sugar's probably averaging around 130. If it's closer to 6-ish, it's probably around 125, 120. If it's below 6, it's 70 to 120. Okay? I don't, but I can get it to you. But that's how that A1C kind of works. Now, here's the tricky part. It's an average. So if you're having high highs and low lows, guess what? Your average looks great. And I will tell you that when I see an A1C in an older person below 7, I'm asking questions. Because I'm thinking they're having low blood sugar somewhere. And that's not cool. And I don't want that. And I have to argue with my doctors in the nursing home, and trust me, I do it once a week, that this is too low. So back off this insulin. This A1C should be 8, not 6, not 5. They're going low. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can say an older person now.
65 and older who's not active.
Okay, so 65.
Yeah, but actually the way the best practices are from the evidence base is 75 and older, period.
Okay.
But, you know, everybody's so different. So if you have an old 65-year-old, you can have an old 65-year-old and a really young 80-year-old.
Wow.
And I've seen them all.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So that is why you can't ever assume that you know more about it than they do, right? They got their experience and they bring that, and you got to respect that. But if they know the signs and symptoms of low sugar, and they know all that stuff, they'll probably pick it up in their own and say to their doctor, if we've accomplished our goal as leaders, they are advocating for themselves, and that will never happen, right? Okay. So, those are some really good questions. Don't let me forget, I'll send you an A1C thing. Other questions along that line, because I want to hit you over the head a minute with food, nutrition, and exercise. Okay, yes ma'am.
And that A1C, because I do work with the population, when you send it out, like you're saying, you're talking for like seniors, these numbers.
Yeah, 8 or above, A1C.
And then,
Everybody else below. Yeah,
8 or above?
8. They want you at 8. Not too much below, not higher.
That's for us old folks.
Yeah, no, it's for other old folks.
Right on.
All right. See, that's so much more fun. Okay, now, a word about exercise.
Average.
You should encourage your people to consider it medication.
Thank you.
That is good.
Thank you.
And if for every person I have in my office walks in and say, I can't exercise, they walk out with something to do.
All right.
Okay? And so one of the resources, and I do not have enough of these. I never have enough of these because I give them out all the time. But in your area, so I'll give you these and you might be able to get her to send you some more. I haven't been able to get her to send me. This is, well, that won't help you, that's in Spanish. This one is called, this is a place called the Missouri Regional Arthritis Center. And there's regions all over the state of Missouri. Okay? And you can actually go to the website, you can put in Missouri Regional Arthritis Center and you'll get the website. The funding has been cut to this program for the last 15 years. Okay? So now, like in our central area, there's one person who has the whole central area. There's one person up in northeastern Missouri, and I'm not even sure of that now. But she's 85. Okay? So the regional arthritis centers are still awesome resources, though. The trick is you got to be patient. You got to call them more than once. You got to email them more than once. You got to pester them. And if you have somebody who says to you that I can't exercise, or I'm in a wheelchair, or I can't stand, you have them call the regional arthritis center, tell them what their health problems are, their orthopedic problems are, and they will send you home exercises you can do.
Wow.
So don't you take that I can't exercise any more than I'm going to take it.
We're checking, we may have.
Oh, that'd be awesome if you did. Because they're awesome. If you find out who your local person is, and you get a main line to them, and they're used to calling them, they'll try to keep you supplied with that. Okay? So that's your answer to anybody who says they can't exercise. Do you know anybody who cannot lift a soup can? Do you know anybody who can't lift a soup can or a water bottle? If they can lift a soup can or a water bottle, they can exercise. And if you're sitting down attached to the NCIS marathon, come on, get them arms a-going, power that up. You can do all that sitting, and I don't want to take no for an answer. And that is strengthening. Now, in an older group especially, you know, whenever we say exercise, what do you think of? Aerobics. Awful. Treadmill. Yeah, no fun. Who wants to do that? Yes, sir.
I do water aerobics.
That's fun. Especially all the women in bikinis. Oh, yeah, that didn't help. Not exactly what comes to mind. Maybe it's a good thing you can't see anything. That's right. Your blood sugar just went down, and so did your blood pressure. Okay. So with that said, as we age, that treadmill and the Stairmaster, not a good idea. Stretch and flex exercises are just as important for our seniors as any of that other stuff, okay? Now, what happens there is the aerobic still becomes important because that does a lot of things. 20 minutes a day is all it takes and you can split it up 5 ways. It doesn't matter. 20 minutes all at once is best to work up to. Walking is fine. Sitting in your chair, kicking your feet. I tell you what, it's so much fun to get people in my office sweating and they're sitting down. Because I just make them stick their feet out. Now try not to kick the person in front of you, please. Put your feet out and flex your feet and just kick. And do it for a whole commercial. And then if you want to get a little frisky, tighten your buns, and do it some more. You will be sweating and happy when Jethro comes back on. It works. And then you can switch it out. Next commercial, do a different movement. You can do it. It works. Okay? But the aerobic exercise is really important for the heart, for sure. But the stretch and flex supports stability, bad back, exactly, the core. You got somebody, I got a bad back, I can't exercise. Well, then you best be getting started with some stretch and flex so you can. And a lot of the YMCAs offer those classes for seniors. They have chair yoga and chair aerobic. You can do that stuff. You got it, but some people, if they're down, they're not going to feel like it. So that's when you go by their house and say, come on, we're going.
They're under PACE, what they call PACE.
PACE, yeah. Yeah, they used to call it PACE. Now they call it something else.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, I don't remember what it is.
I know, most of the office
I want to say, a lot of people have a covered degree, they don't realize they have a wellness program.
Right.
They can go exercise for free.
Yeah, that's right. And so, and even if you can't do that, if you live out in the middle of Timbuktu, then you can go walk around the property. If it's a gravel road, then walk around your house, do the chair work. Find a good video. I know some women who still like looking at Richard Simmons.
Oh, Lord.
Amen, sister. Okay, but you know what? It's fun. So do whatever works for you. Okay. So with that said, I can't say enough about exercise the whole session. But we've got to stay active. That's how you keep things moving. And if it hurts to move, it's going to hurt worse if you don't move it.
That's right.
Okay? All right. So with that said, the basics of exercise and nutrition are the core to diabetes self-management. And unfortunately, sometimes they're the last thing the doctors ever send anybody to learn about. They're quick to give them medicine and pretty slow to teach them what they need to know to manage their food. Okay? So what I'm going to pass out to you is a whole bunch more stuff. Okay? So one of the easiest tools that I use on everybody is this plate. And you can do this with a pencil and a piece of paper, so you don't have to have any high-tech anything. Okay? Is that basic plate. And I'm going to show you another way you can do it visually without needing paper to do it with. So I'm going to pass this around. Okay, so you start with the plate. If you're having a bad day, if your people are having a bad day and they can't count their carbs or do whatever they're going to do, tell them to try to put their plate together like this. And that's the first step. You know that visual trick, I love to do this because it makes it a lot more fun. Okay, which hand do y'all write with? Okay, it doesn't matter which one. Make a fist. Make a fist with it. Whatever hand you write with. There's your starch. That's about how much starch you should have at a time. Now, this is always fun because I need to borrow your fist. Now you see this man's fist?
Oh, yeah.
Now look at mine.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
No.
God gave you your own measuring cup. You can take it up with God if you don't like the size. Now your other fist, that's your meat.
Oh, Lord, that's a good thing.
Start your meat. Oh, look at those muscles go.
Oh, yeah.
All right? We all knew that anyway, all the right? Okay, here comes the hard news. Put your fist together like this. That's your vegetables.
Yay.
Okay, that's your vegetables. All right? So if you say, oh, I can't see that plate, or I can't measure, I don't want to measure, okay, put your fist down next to that pile of potatoes, and if it's twice your fist, put half of it back. Right? Okay. What?
What about this fist? You got to put half of them back?
No, he gets his whole fist. It's not fair. All right, but it is weighted. Okay, so those are a couple quick, easy ways to get people getting their portions controlled. If you have somebody who wants more information and wants to be a little more specific, this thing has been around longer than me, okay? And this comes from the Dairy Council. And this is some like common things that you can portion with. You probably have heard of the deck of cards for a piece of meat. You've heard of a tennis ball for the potatoes, and now you know you use your fist, right? Okay, and the other thing I always tell my people, especially when they say that's not going to be enough food for me when they eat like that, which it will be if they eat their vegetables, we know this. A couple of things. First of all, encourage people that it takes their stomach 15 to 20 minutes to figure out if you put anything in it. Okay, it's not fair. Again, take that up with God. That's not my rule. All right, but it takes your stomach 15 or 20 minutes to figure out if you put anything in it. So when you wolf down that first plate of Thanksgiving dinner and you're still hungry and you feel it again, that's why you're miserable before you get to the second plate. Okay? You got to give it a little bit of time. But what I always tell my people is if you eat that plate and drink a big glass of water and you're still hungry in 15 minutes, go back and get more meat and vegetables. Okay? Because then you will be full. Okay? And if you're not frying the meat every day and you're not loading the vegetables with butter, you're all right. Okay? And yeah, butter's good. A little butter is good. It is. And you know, a lot of people stop using the butter, but if you just use like a little bit, it's good stuff. Okay, so that is an easy way to portion things. But I'm going to tell you, most of the time, especially in older people, if they can eat more meat than that, they need more than a deck of cards. And now this is always a fun thing too. You know what I always tell people instead of that deck of cards? And this group will remember. You remember cassette tapes, right? Right. About half of my patients have no idea what that is. You know what they used to come in? Okay, case, 4 ounces of meat.
My goodness.
Okay? More fun. Eat that 4 ounces. Okay, so there's your basis of eating healthy with diabetes. That is, you need lots of water. Always lots of water. You want to lose weight? 10 pounds down if you drink enough water. Yeah. Okay. Second thing is you need to have some calories within 30 minutes of getting out of bed. Okay, how many of y'all been to a bonfire? You know what it is, right? Bonfires? Half of my clients don't know that. Oh my goodness. The younger ones, they don't know what a bonfire is. Okay, you know what a bonfire is, right? Put the wood down, spray with lighter fluid, throw on the match. How does it feel? Hot, baby. What happens if you don't put any wood on it in 2 hours? Guess what your body is. So if you want to burn calories, you need to put a few in. All right? So within 30 minutes, you need some calories. If you're not a breakfast person, I understand. Have a glass of milk, have a half banana, I don't care. Have an apple. Put a little fuel on the fire, okay? And then every 5 hours, you're awake. Now, there are exceptions to those rules. People with some specific nutrition needs and specific chronic conditions, right? But generally speaking, that's what you all need to be eating. Why is that? If you're on diabetic medication, your medicine's going to flow like that. So if you've eaten 3 times, or about ready to eat the 3rd time in 12 hours, your medication's gotten spread out. You've been able to put it where it needs to go, and it's working for you all day. And then most diabetic medication needs to be taken with food for one reason or another.
Yes, it does.
Okay? So, yeah, and some of it will. And you know, that's one of those other things when you need to know when to call for help. If you start a new medicine and after a week or 2, you're still feeling like it's metformin, after a week or 2, you're not feeling good, you need to call a doctor. In a day or 2, if you're on some of the newer medicines and you're not feeling good, you call your doctor. And we want to make sure our folks know to do that. And if the doctor says no, you keep taking it, then you find another doctor. You need somebody who's going to listen to you. If you're not, you know when you're feeling bad, and if it's not working, it's not, metformin is the exception. It's always going to upset your belly for about a week. But if it's really violent, then you probably aren't going to tolerate metformin either. So those are things why that good rapport with the doctor and somebody in the community they can ask, you can encourage them to go call the doctor and say, look, this is not working for me. Okay? All right, so if you do within 30 minutes of getting up and every 5 hours you're eating something. The next step is don't just eat something. If you can, think about things in pairs, in twos. Okay? So you want some kind of protein food and some kind of starch or sugar. Okay? So what I always tell people is do a little bit of protein. Do some protein and a piece of fruit, or protein and about 5 or 6 Triscuits. or some protein and some vegetables. When you pair those things together, the blood glucose does not spike as quickly. High fiber in your diet keeps the sugar from spiking, and it improves your digestion. For everybody, diabetes or no diabetes, okay? And so then the next step, past some of those fun things like this and the plate and all that, then you got to get into the nitty gritty, because I'm using words and y'all looking at me like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. But a lot of people don't know what carbohydrate is, they don't know what protein food is, and they don't know what fat is. So you want to make sure you explain that. That may be all you talk about one time when you're visiting with them, is getting people to think about their food differently. Not good food or bad food, but think about it differently. And that is where you can assert change in your diabetic community much faster than me. Because a lot of people have been told good food and bad food. Dietitians are like the worst culprits of that. Okay? You got to get out of that, because it's negative. It doesn't help anybody. It's food. I have a nurse practitioner, her name is Shawnee Kellison, up in northeastern Missouri. If you ever meet Shawnee Kellison, you ask her what telling you about food, and she will say, there is no such thing as bad food. I hammered that into her for years. Okay?
Oh, right.
There's no such thing as bad food. Maybe bad portions sometimes, but there's no such thing as bad food. Everything can work. That's the happy message. How you get there takes a little work. Okay? So that's where you need the one-on-one counseling so you really understand the food. So if you had a session just talking about general nutrition, that'd be great. Maybe you had another session where you just talked about getting people to categorize their food. So I'm going to pass a couple of things out. One of these things is because, these two things actually, this is an old food guide pyramid that nobody uses but me. And the reason I still use it is because, yes, it does, because it puts food in categories that make sense to people who like to eat. Okay? So what you do is you think of your food as a meat, which that's your protein, dairy, which is only milk and yogurt. When I say dairy, what other food do you think of? Cheese and cottage cheese. But the way cottage cheese and cheese are made, the milk sugar has been fermented out. Nutritionally, they are meat. And that's when you get people to smile and be happy. And when you hand them this pyramid, then you have them write cheese and cottage cheese next to the meat. Why would you do that? Because when adults write things down, we have a tendency to remember it better. Don't write it all down for them. Let them write it down themselves. And then watch them smile. And in the dairy group, it lists on this pyramid milk and yogurt only. So that's why you ask that question and let them answer it. Almost everybody answers that question right. So have them put it in the meat. And it separates starchy vegetables down with the starch, and it puts the rest of the vegetables in another spot, and it puts the fruit in its own spot. So that's why I use this, because it's easy to think about food that way. And here's a food log, and I'll tell you what the numbers are. They're nothing important for the diabetes care directly, but they're in categories just like this pyramid. So one of the easy things to do is write down what you eat 2 or 3 days. Do not judge it. Just put it in a category. Because one of the big things that sets people up to eat a whole French silk pie instead of one piece is when you tell me I can't have it.
Right.
Okay? Yeah? So if you just have to tally it, well then you look at that and say, well yeah, I ate too much French silk pie, but I didn't realize I wasn't eating that many vegetables. So see, it's not punitive. It's not bad girl, bad boy. It is, oops, look what I'm missing. That's a whole nother situation. And a whole different set of brain chemicals you produce when you're hearing yourself say, oh, I need to eat more vegetables. But it still makes you feel better, okay? So I'm going to pass these two out, and that's how I use them, and you can use them that way too. Y'all know enough about this, you can do that. Yes, sir?
I wanted to ask you about fruit and sugar.
Yes, sir?
I was watching TV the other day, and they were saying these days fruit is carrying more sugar in it.
Nope.
Can you eat too much fruit?
Oh, yeah. And the first way you know that, before your blood sugar ever goes up, hope you got enough to take.
Oh,
But in all fairness, I wasn't making light of that. That's a good question. You can. One piece of fruit is about 15 grams of carbohydrate. Okay? And I will tell you that half a cup of ice cream, you can't have that. You have diabetes.
oh my God.
It has exactly the same amount of sugar as one piece of fruit. Now that's a half a cup of ice cream, and I don't know if you need that much, but that's my point. So the difference though is the type of sugar in fruit, okay? So what happens with that kind of sugar, about 50% of us in the United States will take the fruit sugar and send half of it to the liver. So you might be eating 15 grams of sugar in that apple, but half of us send half of it to the liver and that doesn't go into the blood. That means you're only getting about 7.5 grams out of that total 15. So you don't see the spike. But that's why old nurses to this very day, no insults intended, to this very day will tell people to put sugar in their orange juice. Because about half of us, the orange juice won't bring your sugar up quick enough. When you put the extra sugar in, it will, if you're having a low sugar, right? So now the other half of us do metabolize all that fruit sugar, and it'll bring your sugar up. But because of the nature of it, fruit also contains fiber. So you don't always get this ridiculous spike. Now the issue, my biggest issue with fruit is fruit juice. Because it has, 4 ounces of fruit juice has as much sugar in it as 4 ounces of soda. They are totally different kinds of sugar. Okay, but eat the fruit. Don't tell people not to eat juice, drink juice. Tell them just to eat the fruit. You see there's a difference there. Because if I tell you not to drink juice, what the heck do you think you're going to want? Okay, but just say eat more fruit. Eat the whole fruit. Don't eat strawberries this time of the year. They taste like crap. Eat apples. See, eat fresh fruit when it's in season. Otherwise, buy it frozen or use it in cans. And if your canned fruit's full of sugar, rinse it. Sometimes that's all you get from a food pantry.
Exactly.
And that's okay. Rinse it off. It's okay. Okay? Now, this is, yes ma'am?
Is the fiber content in the juice?
Nope, not usually.
The texture.
Depending on how they make it. So like peach nectar may still contain some of the pulp. And a lot of times prune juice contains some of the pulp, which will have some of the soluble fiber in it. But most of the time, there's hardly any fiber in oranges. And there's a lot of fiber in apples, but you never keep any of that to get the juice out. So that's why it doesn't quite work like that. Just get people, and if they have chewing problems, cook it. I had somebody tell me I'd love to eat apples, but I can't. My dentures are bad. I said then fry them with a little bit of butter and some water, and they fry just nice. They're nice and soft, or bake them in the oven. They're soft and they're tasty. No excuses. We can find a way to get it in. Okay? Now what I'm going to pass out to you now, and this is something, you could do this yourselves. You can make your own menu. Because it's hard to make a menu that everybody's kind of familiar with. And you can even share it if you want, if there's not enough. But this is where I'm going to put you to work. Okay? So what I want you to do is look at this. And it's a menu for a day. Okay, it's a menu for a day. And what I want you to do with your knowledge that you came in here with, plus that pyramid that I just passed out, then I want you to circle the foods on here. And we're going to go through them verbally too in a minute. Okay, so share a little bit in case there's not enough to go around, and then look, and you can work together. Collaboration is allowed. Okay, and you make sheet. Thank you. You make a sheet and look at your pyramid if you need to. But what I want you to do is I want you to look at the food words. So the first food word is oatmeal. Would you consider oatmeal a carbohydrate? Yes. Okay, so if you think it's a carbohydrate, then circle it. So now let's back up a minute as you're looking at that list. The word carbohydrate, 3 or 4 syllables, that is a big word. It is a ridiculous word, and it's thrown around like everybody ought to know what it is. But not everybody knows what it is. Carbohydrate is just a big word for starches and sugars. So anything starchy, anything sugary is a carbohydrate. It is not bad. It's not bad for you. It is a carbohydrate. And the way I always explain this to people is, I'm going to give you a list. I want you to tell me what they all are. Knee-high, tube, ankle, pantyhose. Stockings or socks, right? They're socks. But they're all very different, aren't they? So, apples, bananas, fruit juice, French silk pie, bread, starch, sweet potatoes. Those are all carbohydrates. They're all different kinds. And some of those are there, and they're all good for you. Okay, so what I want you to do is circle the carbohydrate food words as you look through that list. So the first one's oatmeal. The next one is eggs. Then there's bacon. So as you're going through and looking at these, think about, is it a carbohydrate, or is it mostly protein, or is it mostly fat? Okay, but only circle the carb foods. Okay, so there's oatmeal, and there's egg, and there's bacon, and there's toast, and there's milk, and orange juice. And then there's a submarine sandwich, so I did take you to Subway for a BMT on wheat, and it's wheat because I'm a dietitian, sorry. Then there was ham and pepper, and so what, if you don't know what's on a BMT on wheat, it's ham and pepperoni, and salami, and cheese, and then you can put on the vegetables you want. I put pickles on ours, and lettuce, and tomatoes, and mustard, and mayonnaise, and chips, and you drank a Coke because I wasn't standing there, and that was your lunch. Okay? So any of those food words that's a carb, that's what you circle. And then for supper, because anybody who says red meat's bad for you shouldn't be from Missouri, allowed to live in Missouri, I made you a steak.
Oh, wow.
Red meat comes in healthy for everybody at some point, for most people at some point anyway. Some few people can't handle it, but for real reasons. But there's a ribeye, and I made you mashed potatoes, welcome to Missouri, and gravy, and green beans, another Coke, because you snuck it when I wasn't watching, and an ice cream for dessert. Or ice cream before bed if you're from Missouri, or anywhere, or if you're human, right? Okay, so circle the food words, or at least have in your mind which of those foods are carbohydrates. Starches or sugars. Okay? And the more often you use the word carbohydrate and starch and sugar together, people who don't really understand what carbohydrate is, they start to kind of figure it out, and you've improved their health literacy. Okay? Yeah. And now, a lot of our foods do contain, you're bringing up a good point, not just carbohydrate, they contain fat and protein. So what you're going to want to also think about when you look at these foods is which ones are mostly carbohydrate. And then I take you back to the pyramid. Because if you look at that pyramid and the way the food is grouped, the way they're grouped, they're either mostly carbohydrate, they're mostly protein, or they're mostly fat on that pyramid. So usually by the time I spring this on my patients, we've already gone through the pyramid. So if you've gotten a little puzzled with your food, with your menu, let's go to our pyramid just a second. And looking at the top, we've got fats and sweets. So fats are fat. The sweets obviously are the carbs. But then when you go to dairy, the only things that's listed is milk and yogurt, right? Milk, sugar, lactose, carbohydrate. Okay? When you get over to the meat, there's no carbohydrate, unless it's a breaded chicken patty, and that's not really meat. Okay? So if you've got people doing a lot of breaded things, especially if that's what they get from the food pantry, you may have to help them realize that that's part of their carbohydrate load. Okay? And then remember, in your meat, you also include cheese, cottage cheese, eggs, and peanut butter. Okay? Those are proteins, they're meat. Not going to raise your sugar. Now there's your vegetables. And you know, technically, by weight, vegetables are more carbohydrate than anything else.
Really?
But because you and I aren't cows, we don't digest that kind of carbohydrate. That's why cows can eat salad all day long and weigh 1,500 pounds, and you and I eat salad all day and lose weight.
Yeah.
We can't count, thank God for that. We don't digest that kind of carbohydrate, and it's so high in fiber it actually helps our blood sugar instead of contributing to it. Although if you have type 1 diabetes and you're counting your carbohydrates, you do have to count large portions of vegetables because they have to dose their insulin based on their carbohydrate. Type 2 diabetes folks, thank God, usually can get away with eating quite a bit without raising your sugar.
Okay,
Vegetables.
well, vitamin K.
Okay.
So much of the time they say that.
That's for if you have blood thinning problems and if you're on Coumadin. If you are on a blood thinner that is not warfarin or Coumadin, you don't need to worry about the vitamin K. Okay? Thankfully, that's not something everybody with diabetes has to look forward to dealing with. If you've had a stroke, you might. But most people do well with other blood thinners besides Coumadin, which gives us a lot more flexibility with the food. Okay? So with that said, you see vegetables and then you see fruit. Well, fruit is a carbohydrate, so put a little star by it. It's good for you. Remember, carbohydrate does not equal bad. It's energy food, so just put a star by that fruit group, because it's a carb. And then we get down to the starch. Okay, on your pyramid, you get down to starch. And you're gonna see that you have listed there all kinds of things. But anything made from wheat or grains, not evil. Gluten is not evil. There are some people who have trouble with it, that's okay, but it's not evil for everybody, all right? So anything made from wheat is a grain. Okay, anything made from oats is a grain. Anything, quinoa is a grain. Okay, that's like the superfood. Everybody thinks, oh, I can eat all I want. No, raise your blood sugar. Don't like anything else. Okay, it's a grain. Grains are good for you, especially in their whole form. The fiber's there. There's all kinds of minerals that your body needs. You always go with the whole grain, but it's still a carbohydrate. Okay, and then so you're going to see grain products there like bread and cereal. But there's some starchy vegetables. And what I always tell people is you can count them starchy vegetables on one hand. Potatoes, corn, peas, winter squash, and sweet potatoes. That's it. Okay? And that doesn't make them bad food. If you're going to overdose on your starch, those are the ones to overdose on. Because their fiber is so high, it's going to take a whole lot before your sugar spikes.
Wow.
Yay for our side, right? If you like that stuff. Beans are included in there too. Beans are also a good source of protein, and truth is, so are peas, also a starchy vegetable, okay? But because they're so high in fiber, you very rarely see blood sugar spiking when we eat those foods. Now potatoes, without the skin, even with the skin, not as high in fiber as the rest of them.
My goodness.
But it's still a starch, and it still fits in, remember your fist, okay? And then this also includes your rice and your pasta, and anything made from a bread product. So that's your starches, okay? So now yes, ma'am.
You said sweet potatoes, sweet potatoes,
Corn, peas, and winter squash. And so on your pyramid, and food words, they list potato and they list squash, and that they mean winter squash, not the yellow crookneck or zucchini. That goes in that happily for us. That goes in the other food category vegetable, okay? We're talking about the squashes that are coming on now, like the delicata squashes and butternut and acorn. And I'll tell you a fun fact about those in a minute. Yeah, they are favorite, but there's even better news with those. I'll tell you in a minute. And then sweet potatoes and beans. Okay. Now on the actual pyramid itself, the peas and the corn are in a picture form. They're not listed, so I always write it in for my people just so it helps them remember the peas and corn are starches. Okay, so now if you go back to your menu, that can help you figure out what's a carb and what isn't. So is oatmeal a carbohydrate?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a grain. And then how about eggs?
No.
No, it's a protein. Bacon?
No.
No. Fat, right. You have to have 3 slices of bacon to equal 1 ounce of meat. No fair, but it is what it is. It's God's rule, not mine, okay? Toast?
Yes.
Yes.
2% milk?
Yes.
Orange juice?
Yes.
Yes. Submarine sandwich?
The bread,
What?
That's the bread. On wheat? That's the bread.
Yeah, the bread.
Okay, ham? No. Pepperoni?
No.
Right, mostly fat, but yeah, some protein, unfortunately. Salami?
No.
Cheese?
No.
Protein.
Protein.
Yay for our side. All milk sugar's been fermented out. Yay for our side. If you like cheese. Okay, dill pickle slices.
No.
No. What does a dill pickle start off its life as? Cucumber. Now bread and butter pickles, sorry, they've been adulterated.
Wow.
There's sugar in there, you gotta count that. Okay. Lettuce,
No.
non-starchy vegetable, tomato.
No.
Horticulturally, I get this answer in Missouri, in my clients a lot. I love it though. Technically, horticulturally, tomato is a fruit.
It's true.
Nutritionally happy for us, it's a vegetable. Gotta count it. Okay, now, tomato sauce. Have you ever, anybody made a homemade tomato sauce? Okay, one time you need to try it or watch somebody do it. You have to kill a lot of tomatoes to get a little bit of sauce. That's why there is carbohydrate that's measurable in sauce. So you want to be careful with the volume on the sauce. Okay? Especially if they added sugar to it, which some of the dang gone marinara places do. You know, the spaghetti sauce. Okay. Mustard. No, it's an herbs and spices don't contain carbohydrate. Yay for our side. And then mayonnaise.
Yes.
This is tricky. How do you ever make your own mayonnaise?
Yeah.
Eggs and oil. Protein and fat. No carbohydrate. Okay, and then chips?
Yes.
Yes. Coca-Cola? Well,
Yes.
of course, right?
Yeah.
And then steak?
No.
No. Potatoes?
Yes.
Yes. Gravy?
Yes.
Yes. Green beans?
No.
Nah.
Not the pan that hurt.
Nah. Coke?
Yes.
Ice cream?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so, in the interest of time, I'm not gonna make you figure out your portion sizes. But the next step then is you go through and look at the portion sizes that are listed and compare them to what's on the pyramid, and you get an idea of how much. Okay, and just to give you a sample of that, the oatmeal, if you can find on their pyramid, there's on the right side, it says cooked cereal. And it says half a cup. Now, the purpose of these portion sizes is not necessarily, and this is, people think it's a limitation, it's not. Purpose of a portion size is just to help you quantify how much you're taking in. Because the way this pyramid and these portion sizes are set up, they're all equal. So what does that mean? That means there's as much starch in a piece of bread as there is starch in a half a cup of pasta. And there's as much starch in half a cup of pasta as there is in half a small bagel, or an ounce of corn chips, or half a cup of cooked beans. And there's as much starch in a half a small bagel as there is sugar in one small piece of fruit or half a cup of canned fruit. And there's as much sugar in one small piece of fruit or half a cup of canned fruit as there is in 1 cup of milk. Only thing that changes on the milk is the fat content. The sugar is the same in whole milk as it is in skim milk. Why do we treat low blood sugar with skim milk? Because your body doesn't have to fight the fat to get to the sugar. Whole milk will not bring blood sugar up like skim milk will. It's like you may as well have a Snickers bar. Okay? No, don't. For treating low blood sugar. You want to go with the skim milk or the peppermints or the glucose tablets or the soda or the juice. Yes, ma'am.
Does it matter if it's Coke or Diet?
Diet Coke you will never want to use to treat a low sugar. Always use regular Coke to treat a low sugar. Now, if you've got somebody who keeps nothing but diet soda in their house, make sure they got some honey or they got some peppermints or something. You know. Yes, sir.
For Diet Coke, most diets is no good for us. Diet Coke has aspartame.
Aspartame. And actually, depending on which one you get, it might be aspartame, or it might be stevia, or it might be Splenda, and almost all of them contain a sulfate potassium. But here's the response that I give to my patients who've been told that diet soda is bad for them. Drinking 2 liters of Coke is bad for you. Diabetes or no diabetes. You want to know why everybody loses teeth nowadays? You know, there's a generation, my generation, that you from northeastern Missouri, that all had dentures by the time they're 20. Because there's no fluorine in their water. And they drank a lot of soda. Their teeth rotted. Okay? Soda is very acidic, diet or regular, and it's hard on your teeth. Period. But, so what I'll say to you is 2 liters of Coke is bad for you a day. Okay? 2 liters of diet soda is bad for you a day. But if you've got diabetes, I'd rather see you go from a liter of Coke to a liter of Diet Coke for a while, and then let's work together and wean you off of that. Okay? So it's a step process. So I am very careful to say to people that diet stuff is bad for you. Because I'd much rather have you using diet than regular Coke. And then, you know, again, this comes back down to what the individual likes to do. I have some people that just love their Coke. Well, I'll teach you how to work that in just like I teach you how to work in French silk pie. We can do that. But is it good for you? Does that justify? No. And you're still correct. But I never tried to tell them that. I let them try to figure it out on their own. And I just try to show them the facts. And when you tell people, get people the facts and show them the pictures, they come to it on their own. So, you know, a lot of people, it's one thing to know what you're supposed to do, it's another thing to do it.
Amen.
And if you've got somebody telling you need to do this, you need to not do that, you're going to do that. You got to come to it in your own heart and in your own head. So that's one of the reasons why I never tell people they can't have anything. I let them figure out what they're going to have and what they're not going to have. And everybody's got their preferences and everybody's right. So we'll work together and we'll figure out how to work in what you want. Yes, ma'am.
How can we select our calorie goal?
When you select your calorie goal, you probably need to, you can use a lot of online calculators, but your best bet when you really want to get down to checking your calories is to go see your registered dietitian and figure it out. I know one of the issues, like with MyFitnessPal, that has a calorie counter on it, which is great, But then if you input your exercise, it tells you to eat more calories and you never lose any weight and you can't figure out why. That thing's not right. It doesn't take into account the individual people. So when you sit down and come up with a calorie level, that's when you want to have somebody who knows you well enough that they can help you figure out what calories you're using. But where we get into calories and diabetes care, usually I never have to get to calories. Okay? There's 3 nutrients that give you calories: carbohydrate, protein, and fat. So as we move through eating healthy with diabetes, the first thing we talk about is carb control. Not limitation, control. And how to work in the things we like. So now we've controlled carb calories, haven't we? The next thing is we start looking at fat, because we know fat and heart disease there's an issue. The other thing I will tell you all about fat is that fat you can see a high blood sugar on. Not 2 hours after you eat it, but 6 hours later. And the best way I could ever illustrate this to you is I had a couple that used to come see me, and I was taking them through the diabetes care, and there was a Long John Silver's not very far from where I worked. And so he talked about carbs, and they would, and so they figured out what they could eat, even fast food, how to keep the carbs controlled, and they were doing a great job of that. But they came in really frustrated one day, said, "Sarah, my sugar is still high." Well, when is it high? If you're tracking it on that tracker, you can see where it's running high. I'll say, well, okay, so it's high before supper. Did you have any snacks? No, I didn't snack. What'd you have for lunch? Long John Silver's. Well, what'd you have? Well, I had the baked fish, and I had the green beans, and just a few French fries. That confused me. That should have been a low-carb meal. I mean, French fries got fat in them, whatever, but they controlled their portions. They knew what they were doing, and when they say that a little bit, I know they had 15 or 20 grams worth. So that confused me. So I went down to Long John Silver's. I said, in those days, they didn't have stuff online. And I said, "Do you have your calories information?" Well, that manager didn't know what I was, he didn't have any idea what he was handing me. And he handed it to me, right out of his manual. And I looked at that, and I thought, oh, darn. And I looked at the fat grams on the baked fish. And then I looked up and watched him making it. Beautiful white cod fillet. Half a cup spoodle of oil. Right before it went in the oven. Nice one. That's why it's a high fat meal. So yes, you controlled your carbs. 2 hours after lunch, good news, your sugar was pretty good. 6 hours later, it's ridiculous. It's the fat. The fat is delayed. So that's why you want to have basically a low-fat, high-fiber diet. And when you want fried chicken, have fried chicken. Have some low-fat mashed potatoes and some green beans that aren't floating in butter. You did okay, one fried thing, right? If you have an all-fried meal, make a note on that little list that I gave you. Because when you go in to see your doctor, your blood sugar is 225, and he says, "What's this?" And you say, "Fried chicken and French fries." No question about that. We know why it's high. You're not doing it every day. That is not going to make or break your diabetes or get you into complications. And the good news is that if you keep your blood sugar in target range, 50 to 75% of the time, your A1C is going to be good. Your complication risk is reduced. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if I eat a big supper, the next morning, I can be assured that my sugar's gonna be up.
There's a couple of different things.
Okay.
First thing I would tell you is check it in the middle of the night and see what it's doing. For some people, it's spiking, and their bodies are going, "Oh no, you don't," and it produces a ton of insulin, knocks it down. And their liver goes, "Yike, the sugar's too low," and the liver kicks a bunch of sugar into the system. And when the sugar comes from your liver, when you have type 2 diabetes, the rest of your body doesn't pay any attention to that. And the liver keeps kicking sugar in the system. You can wake up with a higher blood sugar of the day. Yes, sir?
My question is, what are low-fat mashed potatoes?
That is when you make, like, let's say you did like, yeah, well, and you know, the trick with the gravy is just a little bit like on this exercise that we just played with. You pointing finger, don't see that. That fourth of a cup of gravy is not so bad. And if you make a big batch of mashed potatoes and it's only like a tablespoon of butter for the whole thing and some milk, it'll taste all right.
I didn't say it wasn't, I was just.
Yeah, that's how you do it. You might be surprised. You can actually taste the potato. Or if you use a Yukon Gold versus another kind, different flavor and texture, and you will not taste it if it's soaking in butter. Taste your food. Really good without all the butter. Okay? So, yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
your body mass.
Yeah, body mass index.
Yes. Do
Yeah.
that plays a part?
Directly in diabetes?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
The weight that made your BMI high does.
Okay.
Okay? Body mass index was a tool designed to help assess risk. Because people are different heights. So we might look at a man that's 6 feet tall and weighs 200 pounds. Two guys, same size, same weight. Both of them will have could have high BMI. Okay? Both of them, do they have a risk for heart disease? Yeah, kind of. Until you look a little closer and you realize the 200-pound guy over here is all muscle and his body fat's low. That's a whole nother set of measurements you have to do. And this is the one with the belly. Okay? He is carrying fat mass, which makes him at higher risk for heart disease. This other one, all muscle, not so much. It is one tool to assess risk. It's an easy one. You don't have to stick anybody. You don't have to make them sit in a chamber and measure everything that comes off of them to figure it out. So we use it. Is it the end-all be-all? No. It's a screening tool. It's way overemphasized, but we know for most people, especially older adults that have a high BMI, they are clinically obese. Your risk factors for heart disease and diabetes go up. The other piece of that too, remember we were talking about the A1C?
Right.
And I said, oh, you want it in this? And then sometimes when I see an A1C of 5, I question the control because that means they're running too low if it's that low. The A1C is also an average. We can use it to diagnose diabetes, but it isn't all. There are some people that really doesn't tell us that it's not always, that's why you still have to check the finger sticks because you need to compare them. Because you might have a good A1C, but if you're having high and low lows, your A1C will look okay. But being too high and too low is just as bad for you over the course of a day. We want it in a little more even keel. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, original gravy that we make,
Homemade, real.
homemade.
Yes, ma'am.
For real. Isn't that better than using canned cream of mushroom soup?
Okay, I'm going to give you an answer on 2 levels for that. On the level of overall fat intake, you still want to be careful with that because you can still see the high sugar. Now, so there's your level 1. Control the gravy. Don't eat it all the time. Have it once in a while. Enjoy it. Okay? On the other level, when you start messing around with anything processed, there's always all kinds of funky starch fillers. And most people's bodies react to those differently than plain old flour or plain old sugar and fruit. A lot of those are modified, like modified food starches and high fructose corn syrup. The way they're synthesized and processed, they will trigger excess insulin response, and if the insulin can't keep up, the sugar spikes. Higher than, and you might have the carbohydrate the same. Like it may be half a cup of this cream soup has as much carbohydrate in it as the apple. The cream soup, you'll see the higher sugar, the apple not so much, because of all the dang fillers. So I always try to get my people to go with real whole food, homemade food whenever they can.
That's what
Yeah. And then when you do that and control your portions, you're going to have better outcomes with your sugar and your health, especially if you keep moving. Exercise. Yes, sir.
Quick question. How nutritional is, I use the pan drippings and some cornstarch with the water to thicken it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that more nutritional or good for me? I know it's
Then
better
what?
than, the gravy with the flour and the fat and all that.
You can make that good pan gravy with cornstarch or flour. And if you do that, either one is much better than from a can. But at the end of the day, it's still too much fat if you don't watch portions. It's still a starch, but it's okay to have it, just don't overdo it.
Right.
And we're way over time.
And I was about to ask you, do you mind staying or can you stay?
I can stay if you have some more questions, but we have a lot of questions and some other stuff
Yes.
needed.
At this time, the lunches are here, but since Ms. Eber has decided she can stay with us, let's give her a big round of applause. We're going to transition, the lunches are here. And so we're going to start with, we can start at the very back row, the restroom, the right outside the door here. And the lunches are in the commercial kitchen. Ms. Glinda's standing here and Ms. Maxine can assist as well. And we can call it a working lunch. How about that?
Sound good.
All right. And just come back and eat it. Brilliant. Yes.
They don't really want to do is to make them laugh or to tell a story. So I told you my story about that physician, and I've got lots and lots of them. And we were just talking in the hallway. I was introduced to a colleague, Miss Jenkins, and she was commenting on all this information that I'm rambling onto. And for if you ever watched any military TV or any movies where they're all military and fighting whatever, and they say drop and give me 50.
Yeah.
Almost everybody knows that means 50 push-ups, right? Well, when you say diabetes or nutrition, I just start rambling, and I can talk for hours on anything this related to this, because I'm pretty passionate about it, and I firmly believe that prevention is the key. And even if you have diabetes, the story's not written. There's still plenty of things to do, and there's a lot of things we don't know about nutrition and diabetes yet. So I'm sure a lot of the stuff, some of the things I've taught you may even change over the years. But one of the other little story I was going to share with you is, in addition to doing diabetes care in my current position and for years, is I am the patient educator. So I work a lot with people who don't necessarily always have diabetes. A lot of hypertension, a lot of weight management and some other things, and IBS and all these other crazy things that come into a clinic. But I'll share with you a story with a gentleman that I worked with for a really long time. And so, I mean, you can learn about diabetes and all this nitty-gritty, high-tech information. And you know, honestly, what it just comes down to is that human touch and and knowing your people. And this gentleman, the story is, he was coming to me with high blood pressure. And he was in third stage kidney disease. So not needing dialysis, but he had some interesting health issues. But he still works 2 jobs, and he's not overweight. Nice, really wonderful, sweet man. Has had his set of losses in his lifetime. And the more I visited with him, that we were trying to get his blood pressure under control, because it was definitely making the kidneys worse. And he wanted to get his sugar under control. When I met him, he did drink, and he smoked Long Brown or something, one of the kind of high-powered cigarettes or whatever. And by the time I finished seeing him, and I say I finished seeing him because I don't get to see him very much anymore because his blood pressure's better. Darn. Anyway, but I bet it took me 8 to 10 hours. We were just struggling. His nephrologist, his kidney doctor, was actually one of the few doctors that actually returned my phone call when I called him about a patient. And we talked about this particular individual many times, because that doctor was just as desperate to get his blood pressure controlled as we were, me and my nurse practitioner. And we worked on the diet. He'd stopped the smoking, he'd stopped the drinking, he'd cut the salt. I mean, he's doing just about everything we'd asked him to do. And he walks all the time, he doesn't drive. And his blood pressure is still not coming down to target. He's not that old. He's late 50s, or mid-50s. You know, so he's not that old. So, that's embarrassing to say that, about probably 8 hours with him before, and a lot of that was listening to him talk about his losses and watching him tear up when he talks about his son with the drug habit and all the things that can go along in those conversations. All of these are barriers to his control at times. And so you're really getting to know that this very sweet gentleman. And as it turned out, part of the reason his blood pressure was not controlled was because he wasn't taking his medicine consistently. And why wasn't he? Because it was too complicated. It was too complicated of a medicine regimen for a man who's working 14 hours a day, 2 or 3 days a week, and never sleeps. Okay? Or for anybody, for that matter. Okay? So with that said, I went to Gerb's and found a pill box that I thought might work for him. And I labeled it specifically, and I said, "Sir, bring all your pills in. Let's work." And he'd done it more than once. So he brought all his medicine in. And we had to resort to medicine for blood pressure that nobody likes to use as a pill. But because of his income, he couldn't afford the patch. Right. You know, so there's all these barriers, you know, we're working through. And it came down to, he just his medication regimen was just too complicated. And like it or not, and I'm sure some of you are aware of that, the more chronic conditions you have or the longer you've had a chronic condition, a lot of times the more medicine. We were just talking about that. And it gets very complicated. And then if you have a little confusion or a low blood sugar and you take the wrong set of pills, then it's a whole other situation. So it's very well worth everybody's time to spend one session talking about nothing but getting your medicine straight. And I also, with this gentleman's pharmacy, I was on the phone with him saying, when he comes in, when you change his prescription, you change the color of the pill on his paper. You ask him for that paper, and you change the color of the pill. You don't get them to do that either. Anyway, but what I brought with me, so that's a long story. I brought you a paper that I just pulled it off a line, but I really liked it because it gave you a spot for the medicine, the description, the dose instructions, and which doctor prescribed it. So you can help your people fill this out and keep it with them, and when their doctor changes their medicine, say, here, this is teaching them to advocate for their care. Fix this on my paper. When they go to the pharmacy, say, are these pills different than what you're giving me? Fix this on my paper. Who's paying for that? You are. Get your service. Get your service. I tell people that when they talk about eating in restaurants too. You know that fist and you want double but eat half? Okay. First thing you always tell people to do when you go restaurant eating is get what you want, put half of it in a box before you start eating. Now you've made an expensive meal less expensive, and you got supper you don't have to cook, right? So all those little things that you might find yourself saying over and over as a lay leader, everybody needs to hear. And as we approach the holidays, I noticed in the lay leader curriculum, they were talking about eating healthy the holidays, some really good tips in there that can help you enjoy all the holiday food without the ridiculously high spikes in the blood sugar. And I would always remind you for yourselves and for the people that you talk to, when they're recording, have them write their blood sugar down and make a note when they overeat or they're stressed. Stress raises blood sugar faster than French silk pie. So if somebody had a heart attack or even a granddaughter had a baby, well, that's a happy stress, but it's still stress, okay? And the only people I know don't have stress are dead. So we just have to learn how to manage that. And making a note of it will help you and your doctor figure out where you need to change treatment versus, that was a bad week. Let's not look at that because that's not me. That's what happened that week. Or, that was Christmas. Don't lecture me about not eating too much. Just because I have diabetes doesn't mean I'm not a person. Okay? So that's advocating for themselves. And so I pass that around just so you've got an example of something that helps you do the visual. And you might have better tools that you're using now, and that's great. The other thing that I always encourage my people to do is to always set goals for themselves every time they leave me. But the goals have some criteria. They have to be realistic. I'm going to lose 50 pounds in a couple of weeks. And don't. It's bad for you. You're losing muscle mass too. We want something that the goal should be about the journey, not about the end result. Okay? So, you want to lose weight. Where do you start with that? Well, maybe instead of drinking 2 liters of soda a day, I'm going to go down to a glass. At least 2 or 3 days a week. I'm not saying I'm going to be perfect, but at least 2 or 3 days a week I can do that. And most generally, when you let people pick their own goals, they're more likely to do them. But you may have to pull them in, like reins on a horse. You may have to say, yeah, you're all fired up and you want to do this, but let's back up and let's think about what's realistic. What's realistic, what's doable, what can you measure? When you get to the end of the week, how can you say, I reduced my soda? Well, that doesn't tell you anything. I only had two cans a day versus a liter. You can measure that. Or I had diet soda all but once. Whatever. You set the goal, but help them make it realistic and something they can achieve. Because it's a lot more empowering to do something, to try something and actually achieve the goal than to set something too high and fail and feel badly about it. Okay? So it may be what you consider ridiculous in a baby step. But babies get places just as quickly as the rest of us. Okay? So help them take those baby steps, especially if you're already feeling like, and a lot of people are like that. I'm going to do this, They're so gung-ho, but it doesn't always work out like that. So you gotta really help bring them back to reality and pick something that's realistic. And so, to help you do that, I also have yet another piece of paper that you can have them write their goals in. Just help them remember to make it on a timeline and realistic. So you can look back and say, oh, look, I did that. Pat yourself on the back. Don't dislocate your shoulder patting yourself on the back. You did a good job. And then after a while, when they meet their goal long enough, it becomes a behavior. So now you don't have to set it as a goal anymore. Now you can move on to something else. And that's the important thing. The only time you truly fail at managing your own diabetes is when you stop trying. Everybody has on the wagon days and off the wagon days. And it's all good. That's right. Okay? So that's the end of my preaching. Yes, sir.
I have a question. It's kind of all not necessarily about diabetes. When you run upon people with taking so many medications, 8, 9, 10 different meds, personally, doesn't make sense. Something got to be counteracted. Wouldn't you think so?
You're absolutely right. And that is always a really rough situation. And this is where I think when you've got an empowered person with a chronic condition, especially somebody who is in good control of their diabetes, they don't ever quite get to that point. Because they recognize what they can do and what they can't do. Or if they really do need all those medicines, they've already set it up so that they can manage it. And I'll tell you, like when I work in my nursing home, that is probably the biggest fight that I have. And so and a couple of facts that aren't fair, but they are what they are. And that is, as we have birthdays, we don't digest as well. We don't need as many calories, we don't need as many nutrients at certain ages, but we also don't digest as well. Okay? So in a textbook, as a dietitian, I'm taught that, oh, you may only need XYZ amount of vitamin A when you hit 65. But then you start to look at the fact that you also don't absorb it very well as you age. Well, you need just as much to get that little less, you know? So it becomes a difficult situation to try to negotiate. Then you add medication. Okay? And this is one of those places where I'll tell you personally, I am constantly at war with the doctor and with the pharmacist and sometimes with the patient. Because a lot of folks how many people do you know are on reflux medications for their acid reflux? Almost everybody. Guess what? The #1 nutrient interaction. Antacids reduce your body's ability to absorb protein.
Really?
Oops. For those of us who like to be slim, trim, and muscular at 85,
Well,
ain't gonna happen with that ranitidine. Okay? Because you are not gonna absorb that protein. So how do you really deal with reflux?
Don't take the medicine.
Low fat, high fiber, and exercise. Don't eat 30 minutes before you lay down. Guess what? Reflux gets better.
yeah.
You do away with the soda, the reflux gets better. But you also have to be fair to the doctors. Because many times they've told people that till they're blue in the face. They say, give me a pill anyway. So they do. Right? So ultimately, we know that if you let the reflux go, that's going to erode your esophagus and your stomach, and now we've got a whole other situation, right? So the pill becomes the lesser of two evils. But at the end of the day, if you're in control of yourself, and you're willing to make changes in whatever it is you're doing, and that's the unfair part. You know, sometimes things happen to us. It's not nothing we did to ourselves. I mean, you may work your tail feathers off to maintain a healthy weight and to eat healthy, and you wind up with diabetes anyway. You're like, well, what's the point? Well, you're going to die at 95 because you got hit by a bus, not because you lost your legs and your kidneys don't work. Right? So you get to pick that. You have some control at some level over something, and everybody does. So sometimes it's helping them realize where their power is and empowering them to use their power to do something. So that's where we go back to talking about the baby steps. And you know, as an educated adult, that they need to be here. But you can't tell them you need to be here. Probably already know it. Gotta go back where they start, where you start. Let's start there and move forward. The only way you're gonna get some way is if you're moving forward. You keep taking steps back because you failed, because you didn't think you could do it, you're never gonna get there. But if you just keep trying, a little bit here, a little bit there, it does add up. And the earlier you start, the more likely the prevention effort's gonna work. So that's all good questions. I hope I answered them. Okay, I think that was that story about that doctor. You are, absolutely. But I could tell you another fun story. Let me think of one. Huh? Yeah, the NCIS, that's the Jethro slap. Yeah, that's the Jethro slap. Because I was so angry with that man, it was really all I could do to not hit him. Yeah, that was the NCIS connection. Because pop behind head. Did you ever hear him? He gave an explanation why he doesn't hit him in the face. I think his explanation was, that's a little more aggressive, and it'll leave a mark. When it's the back of the head, they feel it, and they know it's there.
Right, and it's there.
Yeah, right. And they can choose to remember that without having to look at it. You know what I mean? Something like that. I thought, I can't get that. I'll lose my license. So I better not. Yes, ma'am.
The way that you have explained things to us today
Could help.
will make us think better about our own health. Because you make it seem a fun thing to do, so we'll remember it better.
Well, and I appreciate that, and thank you. And here's where I challenge you to do the same thing for everybody you meet. Because if you go in telling people what they can't eat, what they can't do, nobody wants to hear that. But if you can make it fun, you can make them laugh, and you make them, and you help them realize that you respect them where they're at. You trigger a whole ton of healthy chemicals. And so something that seemed insurmountable now seems doable. And so it's a lot more fun. Yeah, you gotta find the fun in everything. And so use those techniques like the funny stories and the humor and storytelling. And don't be afraid to use other people's stories. So if you want to use that Jethro slap to that doctor, you feel free to do that. All right, any other questions? If y'all have questions, you can always send them to Miss Glenda or Miss Jenkins, and I'm happy, and they can always forward them to me, or you can find me on Facebook, or you can find me on my email address and email me questions. I always answer. No worries, that's what I'm here for.
Okay, I just want to say you are
You think?
I know.
Aw, well,
And you're
thanks.
so personable with it.
Well,
Thank you.
because it's more fun that way.
That's great. You're the
Well, I
job
have
that.
Yeah, but you know what I'm sitting here thinking? I could eat that cookie. I guess one thing we really didn't talk about was label reading, so I guess,
We need to do that.
you wanna do it real quick?
It doesn't do
And you
anything.
didn't talk about the cranberries.
Okay, yeah, well, why were these up there? You figured out why my samples
Go ahead.
and my samplers were trying that
You
out,
have
right?
time.
Okay, so let me show you. I don't have chip bags, so get your chip bag. Okay? And I meant to grab a bunch of stuff from the office, but I didn't do it. Okay, so grab your chip bag and look at the nutrition facts label. Okay, so this is changing, so you can tell if these are new chips or old chips. Because the new chips should have a whole different label on them because they've changed a few things. But some of the key parts are still the same. First of all, the serving size. What's your serving size?
One pack.
One package, okay? And on these cranberries, it's 1/4 of a cup, okay? And on this trail mix stuff from, this is Aldi, it's one package as well. Okay, so somebody said something about calories. I do teach calorie control for somebody who's really trying to lose weight, but not till after we master this other stuff. Because remember, I was telling you that calories come from carbohydrate, they come from protein, and they come from fat. And by the time we talk about all the continuum of diabetes care, we're controlling carbohydrate and we're controlling fat. So guess what else is controlled? Calories, right? So we're controlling calories without ever having to count one, which is a lot more fun. But with that said, if I have somebody who doesn't have diabetes, we can count calories. And at the end of the day, weight loss occurs because calories in are less than calories out. But I have a lot of people who don't eat enough calories and their fire burns out. So there's that balance, okay? So I'm not gonna waste a lot of your time on looking at the label and the calorie part, because that's there. Zeroing in on the total carbohydrate. So where you see the total carbohydrate, what you're gonna notice is underneath it, you're gonna see some other stuff. Total carbohydrates in bold print. Underneath it, some stuff that's indented and not in bold print. Okay? And you're gonna see things like sugars or dietary fiber, and the new labels will have added sugar in addition to other sugar.
Wow.
And then some people will get real smart, I mean not smart alecky, but smart with me, and they'll say, but Sarah, wait a minute. So right here, for example, on the craisins, the total carb is 33 grams. And everybody goes straight for the percent, and I say percent doesn't apply, it maybe applies to one person in this room. It's not me. So let's ignore the percent. The G is a weight. So if you were to pull this cran raisin apart and put the water in one spot, all the minerals in a spot, not much protein in fruit, but you put all the carbohydrate in one spot and the fat that they coated these things with in a spot, the carbohydrate itself would weigh 33 grams and 1/4 of a cup. Just like with the bread, remember on your pyramid it was one slice of bread? If you separated the bread and put the protein and the carbohydrate and the water and the minerals, the carbohydrate would weigh 15 grams. Okay? That's what that means. So that's an actual weight. If you could break the food down, that's what you get. All right? Now, the sugars and the fiber, those are all different types of carbohydrate. So they are included in the total carbohydrate on the food label. They are not extra. Common mistake. And a lot of people also go straight for the sugar. More things raise your sugar than sugar.
All right.
Okay? So now my smart patients who look at that and they're thinking about it, and I know they're critically thinking, they're looking at it, say, okay, Sarah, this says 33 grams of total carbohydrate. The sugars are 29. In this case, the dietary fiber is 3. So that's only 32. Why did it come up short? Well, because there's some other carbohydrate in there that's not sugar or fiber. And they are not required by law to stick that on the label. Okay? Usually, the starch. Okay? But the sugars and the fiber, they're required to put in on there for you. Now, what do you know about dietary fiber other than there's none in any of the chips you ate? Except for maybe the Tostitos. Maybe the Doritos might have a little. The Tostitos and the Fritos. Yeah.
Protein.
Okay. Protein, right? We'll get to protein in a minute. Okay. So what do you know about dietary fiber? Huh? That's right! Exactly! Fiber is a part of a plant that you and I don't digest. And because we don't digest it, it goes straight through. Now there's lots of different types of fiber, and you've heard about that. Soluble fiber is good for your cholesterol, but so is the insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber, you can kind of think of the difference of them, and some labels will actually include both types of fiber. And they'll indent it underneath the dietary fiber. You'll see soluble and insoluble. Cheerios will do that. They're not required by law to do that. Why do you suppose Cheerios is doing that? Because they're bragging. They want you to see there's soluble fiber in there. Go get you a salmon patty or a salmon fillet and look at the fat. Total fat will be listed, and then they list 6 others. They're not required by law to do that. Why are you supposed to do it? Because they're bragging. Because fish has all that healthy oil, and they want you to see that. But when you're dealing with diabetes, total fat, so you know it's a high-fat product, right? Total carbohydrate includes the sugar and the fiber. Okay, now back to the fiber. Fiber is a part of a plant that you and I don't digest. And because we don't digest it, as it moves through, what it does is it pulls water into it. And you know, when you drink, you can feel your stomach expand, right? Well, fiber pulls water to it. So even if you didn't drink any water, the fiber's going to pull water from other places. Oh, happy day, especially if you're holding too much in your ankles, right? Okay, so it pulls it in, and that increases the bulk of the food mass, and it softens it. So as it passes all the way through those miles of intestine that most of us have, it's soft and moves. And the fiber, as it's pulling water, pulls in some air and some other things, and it is able to pull in all these bacteria that can help you digest and get the nutrients out of that food. And it does it at a rate that the bacteria can get the most out of it. Okay, that's awesome news. And then at the end, it all comes out easy, which is good too, right? That's right. Okay, now, fiber is a carbohydrate. But because you and I aren't cows, we can't digest it. Cows can, that was that salad reference I made for you earlier. That's why cows can eat grass all day and weigh 1,500 pounds, and you and I eat salad all day and lose weight, okay? But fiber is a carbohydrate, and as a result of that, it's included in the total carbohydrate on the food label. But you will not digest it, therefore it will not contribute to your blood sugar. Yay for our side, right? So the rule is, anytime you have 5 grams of dietary fiber or more, you can subtract it from the total. Bad news for every bag of chips you just looked at, because ain't none of them high enough. And it's not in my cranberries either. And if I hadn't gotten sideswiped by the lady who needed me to fix her meter before I walked out of the office, I would have grabbed some boxes that had a high fiber on them so you could kind of see. So what you end up doing is you take the total fiber, if it's 5 grams or more, and subtract it from the total carbohydrate. And when you do that, the total carbohydrate is what you're actually going to get sugar from. And how many of you would say your math is pretty good? Me either, that's why I carry a calculator. Okay? But if you take the total carbohydrate after you subtract the fiber and divide it by 15, it tells you the equivalent of pieces of bread that product has. So for example, an easy one, let me think if I can remember. Okay, I'll think it. So there's this brand of frozen dinner called Amy's. And they do a lot of, they're organic and expensive. Every once in a while you catch Gerber someplace, put them cheap. Anyway, they do a lot of Mexican. And they're kind of high in fiber because they always have beans and whole corn in there. So the fiber's high and the protein's high as well. So let's say we're looking at that label and it's a box, frozen box, and the total carbohydrate is 48 grams. Well, you look at that and go, yike! If you divide 48 by 15, it's about 3. So like that, 3 slices of bread. Well, that may be more than I can handle. Most men will tolerate 30 to 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate without their sugar spiking. Most women 30 to 45. It varies from person to person. That's just general. And that's enough to get your sugar up a little bit but not spike it. But there's 48 grams, and that's edging on the high end. The trick is there's 9 grams of fiber. So when you take 48 minus 9, you're at 39. So that is almost half a carb serving that you've just dropped because you chose a high fiber food. And breakfast cereals are that way too. And this is where you can go look at Cheerios and stick it back on the shelf. Now, the other trick is you got to remember that the serving size that the box designates. So whoever packages that food can package it however they want, and they can determine that portion size to be whatever they want it to be. There's no regulations on that. What they have to do is tell you how much of those nutrients are in the amount they designate. So when they tell you that a cup of cereal is a serving, the information needs to be what's in 1 cup. And if you can prove differently, sue them and retire in St. Thomas. Okay? And that's the truth. Okay? So that's the way you work that. But just because it says that a cup is what you should eat, that may not be what you eat. It may really be 2 cups. And my favorite example on this one is canned or peas. If you don't like peas, don't listen. But I had a nurse I used to work with who loved peas. And we had so much fun every time I let her teach this with the canned peas because she just got such a big kick out of it every single time. And I'll bet we taught this class 100 times in the 3 years we were in the grant together. So you go to the pea can, right? And you're looking, it says like 30 grams or a week. It says something like 25 grams of carbohydrate in a cup of peas or something. And you're like, I like peas. Then the fiber is 10 grams. So by the time you subtracted it, it was down to 1 serving, or even less, half a serving. So I just taught you that peas are a starchy vegetable, but it almost took them back to the level of a non-starchy vegetable. So if you really like peas, overdose on the peas, right? But the fiber's high, and that's why. Now, the other thing, and this is a quick trick that I tell my clients when they're trying to gauge boxed food, which I discourage. Homemade food, better for you, okay?
Are you saying that about our lunch?
No, ma'am. Right. Homemade, like macaroni and cheese, that was a good one. Macaroni and cheese, okay, boxed food like that. okay? So one of the things, and granola bars. Have you ever stood at the granola bar aisle at Walmart? That is overwhelming.
Yes.
I just say no. Just say no, I don't need, I just walk right by it. It is way too much for me. You tried to look at all those labels, you'd be there forever, they'd be closing the place on you. Okay, so what you can do then, if you're trying to find something quick and fast, that's gonna work for you, is you're looking for at least 5 grams of fiber, under 250 calories, and at least 7 grams of protein. That'll be a little tougher, that's gonna narrow it down. So why did I tell you about the protein? One thing you might wanna tuck in your file bank about protein, remember we talked about all those nutrients that give you calories? We didn't ever talk about protein. Protein is sugar neutral. It neither raises it nor lowers it.
Wow.
So when somebody tells you that your sugar's low, eat protein, correct them. It is not gonna raise your sugar or lower it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you go over that again?
Yes, ma'am.
5 grams of
Oh, the little
fiber.
trick, the little quick trick,
Uh-huh,
250 calories,
okay,
5 grams of fiber, 7 grams of protein.
thank you.
So protein is sugar neutral. Doesn't raise it or lower it. Peanut butter, if it brings your sugar up, it's because some annoying packaging company put sugar in it. Mother Nature put a little bit in there, but not much. And I had a patient tell me one time, we were having a discussion about peanut butter. And I said, plain peanut butter, just get the store brand. You don't need any of that fancy stuff. There's no sugar in that. She said, Sarah, I think the Great Value brand has sugar in it. I said, I don't think so. So it wasn't a bad argument. It was a discussion and a disagreement. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you'll make it home before me. Check it and call me. Do you know she called me? She said, Sarah, it's peanuts, sugar, and salt. I said, oh, no, really? I was so irritated. Okay, so lesson learned, humble yourself with dietitian. No matter what brand it is today that you think that it's just peanuts and salt, check it tomorrow because it might change. Okay? And they can change that. But if the carbohydrate is low enough, they may not really report it. Okay, there's a level there. Okay, so with that said, peanut butter is not going to raise your sugar if you're having a low. Now, if you eat half a jar, it'll be high in 6 hours because the fat's high. Okay? Peanut butter's great. I'm not saying peanut butter, but it's fat. Okay? So with that said, peanuts and nuts also contain protein. Meat, that's the primary ingredient in meat and eggs. Okay? Protein is sugar neutral. Neither raises it nor lowers it.
But the peanut butter will give you protein.
Yeah, a little bit. It will.
Not much.
And if you look at the amount of calories, though, that's when you kind of say, okay, I'll balance this. Because if your calories have been low all day, who cares? But if you're already pushing it, you may want to temper your portion size. So I always tell people that do peanut butter, I say, have some peanut butter, not some peanut butter. Okay?
Bananas.
Bananas. Yes, ma'am. What do you want to do?
Okay. I was told that you know, with the too many carbs, you know, you don't need to eat a whole banana.
No, well, the trick is how big the banana is. Okay, and that's the way with Mother Nature makes the fruit, exactly right. So you can sometimes find those little ones.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a 1-part banana, or you cut it in half. And I have people say, Sarah, who does that? And I'll have to say, okay, I do that. Matter of fact, I just pulled half a banana out of the refrigerator this morning and put it in the oatmeal. What'd you say?
It was brown.
Yeah, the outside was brown, but the thing about refrigerating your banana is it will always make the peel brown. Right? But after I cracked it open, and I only ate half, the outer peel was brown, but it kept the rest of it from getting gnats. Right? Yes, sir?
Does the sugar increase in banana as long as you keep it?
Actually, yes, and some fruits don't do that, they go starchy. But the total carb does not change.
Okay.
And remember that some of that sugar is the fruit sugar, so you may be about lucky 50% that sends half of it to your liver. Wow. Okay, so I bring that up about protein so that you don't have somebody trying to treat your low blood sugar with protein, that ain't gonna work, okay? But the other thing about protein is it's so important for muscle building and for strength. Now, carbohydrate, you use protein to build muscle, but let me ask you this. If you're going to build a house, and you got your bricks, and you got your mortar, what happens if you don't have anybody to put them together?
All right.
There's still bricks and mortar.
Right.
You've got to have carbohydrate to put them proteins together. So all those bodybuilders that do all protein, they're wrong. You need carbohydrate.
That's right.
Yeah, we do. You need the carbohydrate. But as we age and we're taking antacids, You're gonna need as much protein as you did when you were 18. You need to get the protein in. So that's where the dairy protein, if you tolerate it, like cheese, sometimes it's easier to get more with some of those things, or to grind up some meat and stir it in soup. If you got an elder that's using canned soup, fry them some hamburger up, drain the grease off, and put it in little baggies so they can add a little of that ground whatever to their canned soup. Now you're putting things back in balance. So when you put protein together with other things, the fiber in fruits and whole grains and vegetables fill you up. The protein holds you. So that kind of relates back to some other things we were talking about. Okay? So, and the reason I told you, the whole point of giving it, that was a tangent. The reason I use that 7-gram number on your, on the label is, does anybody know what an ounce of meat looks like? An ounce of meat.
That's not a difficult.
Big as my finger.
Oh, wait there.
Do you know anybody who eats that little bit of meat? No! That's 7 grams of protein. So when you look at a TV dinner and you think it's substantial, double check those numbers. Every 7 grams is an ounce of meat. So if it's really substantial, that number better be 21 to 28 grams. And if it's not, then you better add some cottage cheese or a piece of meat to it. Likewise,
Give me that 7 grams of protein.
7 grams of protein in 1 ounce of meat.
No, but you put 5 grams of fiber.
Oh, 5 grams of fiber, 7 grams of protein, 250 calories, like for granola
Okay,
bar.
5 grams of fiber, 250 calories,
7 grams of protein.
protein. Okay,
If you're gonna use a granola bar as a meal substitute,
Gotcha.
or a quick snack, because you're gonna skip a meal, or you're gonna have to go longer than 5 hours, it needs to have that in there. If you can use some of those numbers when you're evaluating TV dinners, and for some of our elders, let's face it, they don't cook. Or they can't stand up long enough to cook. So now we gotta find a way to make convenient food healthy for them. And this is how you do it, is if you evaluate those numbers on the back, now you know whether it's a good source of protein, now you know whether it's a good source of fiber. Yes, sir.
You said 7 grams equals an ounce?
An ounce of meat
I thought 28 grams.
is a portion. Oh, no, that's 4 ounces. Now we're back to our cassette tape.
28 grams equals 1 ounce.
Nope, 7 grams of protein for 1 ounce of meat. So that 28 would be about a cassette tape size of, remember the cassette we were talking about? That's a 4 ounce chunk of meat. So that's a reasonable protein amount. So if you got a TV dinner that doesn't match that 5 grams of fiber and at least 21 to 28 grams of protein, add something to it. Especially when you're dealing with an older population and that's all they can do. So if they can eat cottage cheese, or if they can eat ground beef, or even some lunch meat, that's not always the best choice, but it's better than not getting it.
Well, and you just send them those, ones that's with Meals on Wheels.
Yeah. They send them 2 to 3 ounces of meat. So that's 2 or 3 ounces of meat with the meal. So that would be 14 to 21 grams.
Well, they get the frozen.
Yeah, they'll get a frozen dinner, like usually 2 a day. Yeah. And then it's still a good idea if they've got fast, easy protein for in between. So the peanut butter, and if they can chew, nuts works okay. Just don't let them try to use that for a low sugar. Okay, that was a quickie on the labels. And I better get back to the clinic. So does anybody have any questions?
No, thank you.
That was a lot. Well, thank you all for having me. It was my pleasure. Go forth and fix people.
All right, thank you.
So you're welcome. Throw all this stuff in the bag. Miss Gwen, see you again. And it was very nice to meet you.
Before you get back to Columbia.
See you later. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
This kind of backwards, now we're learning how to undo what we just did.
Oh, you can, yeah, you can get that.
Did everybody do their pre and post test? Thank you. Rosie's got some for you. Okay, this will be very informal here.